Good evening and welcome to the May 1st, 2013 meeting of the Murfreesboro Planning Commission. On the very front end, I want to apologize for my voice. My allergies are in high gear during this season, so if I lose my voice somewhere near the in the middle of the agenda today, I may have to turn it over to co-chair Mr. Young over here. So we have a quorum present tonight, so I'm calling the meeting to order at this time. We have 5 public hearings on the agenda tonight, the first of which is a zoning application for approximately 6.68 acres to be rezoned from RS-15 to commercial highway at 2315 Joe B. Jackson Parkway. Ms. Linda Sneed, on behalf of Stones River Church, is the applicant. Ms. Ely, good evening.
Good evening, Chairman Lamb and Planning Commission members. Our first public hearing this evening is to consider changing the zone for approximately 6.68 acres located north of Joe B. Jackson Parkway from its RS-15 district, which is single-family residential district, to CH, commercial highway district. The property is currently developed with the Stones River Church and occupied and utilized as Stones River Church. The area shaded orange is on the map that you have on the screen is the requested property. The property to the north and to the west is zone PRD, and that's Planned Residential District, and is a part of a residential plan development with multifamily and single-family detached products. The properties to the east are zone CH, that's Highway Commercial District, and it is currently mostly undeveloped with the new Dollar General store located on the parcel that fronts on Manchester Pike. And to the south is Joe B. Jackson Parkway, and just south of that is Magnolia Trace, the county developed single-family subdivision. A little further to the west is the interchange for Interstate 24. It's also one of the city's premier industrial developments in our community, location of the Amazon facility, as well as Panattoni cold storage and various other types of industrial uses. The existing church, Stones River Church, currently has a special use permit to allow that use as a special use permit. The church desires to include the possibility of some uses that are not permitted as a special use when they are not accessory to the principal use. The church would like to have options for possibly a child care facility or a restaurant type use that is not accessory to the church. For this to be approved, the property must be rezoned, and the request before you is to change that zoning to CH. Ms. Linda Sneed is here this evening, and she is representing the church. I'll invite her to come up and say a few words before you open the public hearing. If you have questions, we'll be glad to answer them at any time. Ms. Sneed?
Hi, I'm Linda Sneed. I'm the Executive Director of Stones River Church. I, along with other members, are here from the church, and we're located at 2315 Joe B. Jackson Parkway. We're asking for a zoning change, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Does anybody have any questions for Ms. Sneed? Thank you very much for coming up, Ms. Sneed. Any questions or comments from members of the Planning Commission or the staff? If not, before I open this first public hearing, let me briefly go over the rules that we conduct our public hearings by. As you can tell, we have quite a few people here tonight, and many of you will want to speak, so we will be observing the 3-minute time limit. So please, when you come up, make your comments brief and to the point. Try not to be redundant on things that have already been covered. And if you have questions, we'll make notes of your questions, and the staff will attempt to answer your questions at the end of the public hearing. Make all your comments to the Planning Commission, and we will take them into account when we're making our decision. All that being said, I'll open the public hearing, ask anybody to come forward. If you would, come to the microphone, state your name, and give your address when you come forward. Would anybody like to speak on this matter? Nobody? Seeing nobody come forward, I'll close the public hearing. Comments or questions from members of the Planning Commission?
Mr. Chairman? Are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, in our work session, we studied this fairly extensively, and I seem to think that it's in good order. So with that, I'll move for approval.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? The motion carries. Second public hearing is a zoning application for approximately 0.7 acres along East Main Street to be rezoned from RM12 to Commercial Highway. Special Kids Incorporated is applicants. Ms. Ely?
Thank you, sir. Our second public hearing this evening is to consider changing the zone for approximately 0.7 acres located south of East Main Street, just past the intersection of East Main and Lassiter Drive. This property is located along the corner of Arnett Street and East Main Street and is identified as orange on the as the orange parcel on the map that you have on the screen. The property is currently zoned RM12, and that's multifamily residential district. To my knowledge, the existing structure is a single-family structure. The properties to the north are zoned RM16, RM12, and PRD, plain residential district. The contiguous property to the east is also zoned RM12. Property to the south is zoned PCD, plain commercial district. And the property to the west is zoned CH. Just directly across Arnett Street to the west on the opposite corner of Main and Arnett Street is the location of the Special Kids, Inc., and that is a use which caters to children who have special needs and provides a valuable service to our community. The Special Kids, Inc. has an opportunity to purchase the house located on the subject property, which you're considering rezoning this evening. They have an opportunity to purchase this property in order to utilize it as part of their program and expand it to the existing structure. A zoning change is required. So the request before you is from Special Kids to rezone the 0.7 acres from multifamily residential district RM12 to CH commercial highway district to allow an expansion of the Special Kids use in this parcel. Mr. Matt Taylor represents the applicants. I don't believe he has a presentation, but he is ready and available to answer any questions you may have about the application. Staff, of course, would be available to answer any questions that you may have. You should conduct a public hearing prior to making your recommendation to City Council.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Taylor? He's sitting over there. Okay, if there's no questions, I'll open the public hearing and ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak either for or against this proposal. Seeing nobody come forward, I'll close the public hearing. Any comments or questions from members of the Planning Commission?
Move for approval.
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Before I move on to item C, I neglected to recognize a visitor tonight. Mr. Nathan Creech is sitting in the back row back there. Nathan is a Boy Scout who's working on his citizenship badge. So, Nathan, thank you for coming. You picked a good night to come to observe due process. So thank you very much for being here, and good luck to you. Moving on to item C, a zoning application for approximately 89.75 acres along Memorial Boulevard to be rezoned from RS-15 to commercial highway. Mr. Brick Murphy is listed as the applicant. Ms. Ely.
Thank you, sir. Our third public hearing this evening is to consider changing the zone for approximately 89.75 acres located north of Haynes Drive and along the western side of Memorial Boulevard, or Highway 231, from its current RS-15 single-family residential district to CH Highway Commercial District. The properties located to the west are part of developed city single-family subdivisions, also zoned RS-15. Properties to the south are zoned both RS-15 and CH Highway Commercial District and Office General District and Commercial Medical Residential District. Just across Memorial Boulevard at the intersection of DeJarnett Lane and Memorial Boulevard is State Farm, which is zone CP, which is a form of a planned commercial zone. Also across Memorial Boulevard are property zone PCD, planned commercial district, OG, General Office District Residential, CL, Local Commercial District, and PCD again. The request consists of approximately 54 acres, which was requested to be zoned from RS-15 to CH, and it also consists of 35.5 acres, which was included as additional study area, and the map that I've put up before you now identifies those parcels. 11 of the parcels that are all separately owned, for which the applicants have joined together to make this application, are identified in the orange, and the blue is 7 parcels and portions of 2 additional parcels fronting on Memorial that were included as additional study area for you to consider changing the zoning for, and then, of course, after the public hearing this evening. So the 54 acres plus the 35.5 acres is just approximately 89 acres. This entire area was annexed in 1979, and it was zoned for single-family purposes since that annexation. The city embarked on a comprehensive zoning change in 1984, and at that time, this property was zoned RS-15, single-family residential district. The staff has not been approached by any potential developers for this site. The applicants have not indicated that redevelopment of the property is imminent, and that, however, the applicants share a belief that their property is no longer appropriately zoned, and they desire to change their zone to CH so it can develop in a commercial manner. Mr. Brick Murphy has been hired by the applicants who have requested the zoning change, and he'd like to have a brief introduction of the application, followed by other members of their design team to introduce the properties and to outline what the change is. After Mr. Murphy and his team present the application, you should conduct a public hearing prior to making any decisions and recommendations to the City Council. Of course, staff is available.
Mr. Murphy, good evening.
Good evening, Chairman Lamb. Thank you, Ms. Ely. Good evening once again. I'm Brick Murphy of the law firm of Murphy & Murphy, and I represent the 11 properties totaling 54.7 acres owned by 8 families on the corner of Haynes Boulevard and then continuing down Memorial Boulevard. Our firm was originally contacted, and we originally got involved in this, and we were representing just Janine Lassiter. But over time and after thinking about this application for some time, we decided it would be best to bring in additional properties, and that's why the application before you tonight has a total of 11 properties, not just one. We felt like it would be best to expand that area, and we felt like the more properties we were able to include, the more that we could plan for things like drainage, traffic flow, and other design criteria that would make this more attractive ultimate development. On April 9th, we had a neighborhood meeting at Irma Siegel Elementary School on this project. In advance of that meeting, I sent out 80 letters to the property owners within 1,000 feet and then some additional property owners as well. We had approximately 50 interested citizens and neighbors that attended this neighborhood meeting. There were 2 major concerns that were expressed at this neighborhood meeting. One was drainage, and the other was traffic. The neighbors that were concerned about drainage were in particular in the Palmer Heights subdivision. And they said their yards flood during storms, and that this property floods as well during major rain events. In fact, we had a rain on Saturday, and the property, Miss Janine Lassiter's property, has several inches of water on it, and some of the properties in Palmer Heights also have standing water as well. However, we believe that if this property is zoned commercial, that we will not contribute to future flooding on these properties, and that we're here to be part of the solution to the problems that the neighbors are facing. If this property is zoned commercial, the city will require the proposed commercial developments to catch and to manage their stormwater runoff that presently pools on the properties in question, and also pools in Palmer Heights as well. The management of stormwater should help prevent some of the properties that adjoin from flooding in the future. And such a plan would also allow the Palmer Heights residents to drain into a larger drainage structure, a ditch, that would serve to benefit the entire area. Mr. Bill Huddleston, president and an engineer with Huddleston Steel, is present tonight. He's conducted a drainage study of this entire basin, and he's part of our team, and he's going to speak here in a little while. In a few minutes, he's going to discuss the opportunities that we think that this potential commercial development will give us in terms of fixing these drainage problems. Also, I might point out that it's proper for the city to put the cost of doing these drainage improvements on a potential developer when it comes to the development of these particular properties. So it's something that the city could properly ask if somebody came in to build a Trader Joe's, for example, that we go ahead and start addressing these problems. Also, the other major issue that was pointed out at the neighborhood meeting was traffic. Should the properties along Haynes develop as commercial, the city would have an opportunity to either tap those developers to put money into a fund to improve Haynes, or y'all could require, as those properties come online for development, that the property owners that adjoin Haynes would put the costs, those developers, of improving Haynes Drive there. In a few minutes, Mr. Randy Caldwell, a land planner and landscape architect with Reagan Smith, is going to walk you through the signal opportunities for traffic lights and those sorts of things that we think a proposed commercial development would be able to provide in terms of addressing traffic issues. I think this is a rare opportunity. When you have this many tracks come together, it gives y'all an opportunity and us an opportunity as the applicants to paint with a broad brush. And we've got a large piece of property that's coming before you tonight, so we've got a large canvas to paint on that we can address issues that we couldn't address if we were coming in with each of these individual properties in a piecemeal fashion. And I think having all these property owners come together is going to result in a more unified and well-defined and developed future commercial development, which will give the neighbors and the city the best possible result for this very visible corner of our community. If these, of course, if you had these properties come in individually, you wouldn't have this continuity of design and ability of the property owners to work together for the ultimate good of not only the city, but the adjoining property owners and the property owners that are before you tonight. In closing, this is the last corner on Haynes, DeJarnett, and Memorial that's not already developed as commercial. When State Farm came in across the street, it changed the dynamic of Memorial Boulevard from a largely residential and agricultural area to a commercial area. The applicants feel that this rezoning before you tonight to commercial highway is really the only logical use of this corner going forward. I've spoken to Judge Mark Rogers, who owns one of the tracks that's in the study area on Memorial. He's very supportive of the application. And Mr. Kurt Mason, on behalf of Stones River Manor, retirement community on Haynes Boulevard across the street from these properties, wrote a letter in support of this application. And one of the things that he pointed out is that there's a lack in this area of town of retail and restaurant opportunities for his residents. Some of them don't drive very much or don't drive at all, and having close opportunities for them to shop and dine is a huge benefit that he sees to his residents. As previously discussed, my firm, Murphy & Murphy, was hired by the applicant to help in this process. Mr. Randy Caldwell with Reagan Smith, landscape architect and land planner, was also hired for this process. And Mr. Bill Huddleston, president and an engineer with Huddleston Steel Engineering, has also been hired. I think the hiring of this team shows that the applicant has a commitment to designing this project with the highest degree of care, expertise, and sensitivity to the surrounding uses, and to doing this development to the highest possible standards. Mr. Caldwell will give a brief PowerPoint presentation. Then Mr. Bill Huddleston is going to discuss the drainage opportunities that we feel like this property gives to the neighbors. And then our team obviously will be here to answer any questions you may have. And we just ask you to vote in favor of this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Brick, and I will be brief here because I know Bill and I would like to get to the issues that we heard at the neighborhood meeting on April 9th. So going to try not to be too repetitive from what Brick had gone over with you, but I do want to go over some images that basically support some of the things that he had said, as well as Margaret Ann. And again, as you see up here, I'm going to hit the F5. It's not going to the full screen, but let's see if we can work with what we got there. Again, this is just an overall aerial, just showing you the properties by which we were hired for to represent here. And again, as Margaret Ann had said, and as Brick had said, this is basically 11 different properties, 54.3 acres. Very similar in size to the State Farm across the street. You can kind of see from the aerial image how big that campus is, and this is very, very comparable to that, with Memorial Boulevard on your right and Haynes Boulevard on your south. And again, an unusual circumstance in that the fact that you've got 9 different property owners that realize the benefit of working together as a whole, that provides some opportunities to plan the development as a whole and look at all the issues as a whole as well. Again, why are we asking for this? And again, as Brick had mentioned and as some others, Memorial Boulevard has changed. The dynamics over the years have changed. This is an inventory of the businesses, the commercial, institutional uses that have occurred along there right now. And that's just an inventory of 31 different developments along that corridor. Obviously, something that would be expected along a 5-lane arterial, as one can imagine. That's the character of that. And again, as you look at the surrounding intersection, the last really truly remaining corner there that has not been developed commercially on here. The zoning, proves that out. You can see the big block of the CH. If you look on there, the green obviously is a Mike Park that is representing the southeast corner. You can see the pattern that has basically evolved along the corridor, but which is primarily commercially zoned property. You see a couple PUDs along there, planned unit developments, but most of them are straight zone commercial properties along there. And I don't think this even represents some of the more recent requests that has been made on Mr. Haynes' property. So again, that corridor is proving out to be zoned as such, and I think we are being consistent with what we are requesting before you today. Again, the neighborhood meeting held on April 9th, and there was a couple other issues beyond just the traffic and drainage that we heard, that at least I heard, that we feel we wanted to address tonight. And I think you've heard on a number of occasions for properties that have come up before you the plan development approach versus the straight commercial highway zoning approach. And again, if you go back when the economy was rolling and there was a lot of certainty relative to development, the PUD applications were very appropriate. And basically, in my experience, where we really applied that in most cases was where you had mixed-use developments where the one zoning classification didn't fit everything that the developer wanted to accomplish. And actually, in many occasions, we were seeking bulk regulations above and beyond what the base zoning classification, and because we took the PUD approach, there were some design expectations that were expected in order to allow for that to occur. But as much as anything, the market has changed relative to that over the last several years. But another thing that has changed over the years is your zoning ordinance has evolved over that, and modifications have been made to address design quality and all that. And we feel that the teeth is in there now that basically certainly supports development under the straight zoning classifications that you have right now. So I believe that's why we're requesting that. Again, I think we're being consistent when you go back and you look at the zoning map, that most of the properties along there are just straight zone commercial right now. Buffer was an issue as well that we heard, and understandably so, with the properties that backed up to this. Under the CH zoning classification, all that's required is a 15-foot wide buffer with planting and a supplemental planting in the form of evergreen trees and deciduous material. One of the benefits that's going to come out of this, and Bill's going to touch, I think, more in detail of how the drainage approach is going to be taken for this to solve some of the drainage issues here, that what we are seeing, and this will help solve a couple things, I think the buffer issue and the drainage issue, is rather when Bill explains this, what the anticipation is that there will be a drainage easement that will be right up against the properties right there. So we anticipate a 20-foot wide drainage easement that will be up there, and then what we are proposing is we'll put the 15-foot buffer planting on the other side of it. So in retrospect, instead of having just a 15-foot buffer and then the drainage easement, separation is also a great buffer as well. So with those combined, actually we'll have a total of a 35-foot wide buffer in effect, which is well in excess of the 15-foot. And I think even on some past applications that have come before you in the past several months per se, there's been just 20-foot buffer commitments made relative to that. So again, I think we're exceeding some expectations that have even been done on some recent properties out there. Again, the next issue, if you might put the slide up there, is again traffic. And again, when the staff always has us take a very hard look at that whenever we come before you, relative to site plan approval, and even when we're seeking to rezone a piece of property. What you can see again there is on Memorial. We will obviously, the expectations will be to align with the accesses that State Farm has across the street. And one of the things we want to do is protect the integration of having a potential signal on here. And you can see the arrows are identifying the 3 primary points of entry that we would anticipate with that. And the spacing actually works out to where it makes sense to put a signal basically on that 3rd access to the north. And that's closely looked at by both the staff, by the state. And obviously there have to be some traffic warrants met to accommodate that signal. But again, just protecting the integrity of that and the ability to put that there. On Haynes, you'll see because all these properties are coming in together as one, you see Wendellwood Drive there that is to the south off of Haynes that basically serves the back portion of Iron Gate Village. Again, that is separated by 1,200 foot, which again is proper spacing for a potential signal there. And because these are property owners are working together, what we really see the development scenario playing out on this is that access from Wendellwood would be continued through the development and connect to the other connections out to Memorial. So there'll be a lot of interconnectivity that would occur along here as this is planned out. Again, as far as additional roadway improvements, and I know Brick touched upon this, that I think there would be an expectation, depending on the size of the development comes in, with improvements being expected on Haynes Boulevard, whether that occurs or the city project occurs first. Memorial, with being a 5-lane arterial, we would certainly anticipate probably some deceleration lanes or acceleration lanes being required by the staff to accommodate the potential size of the development there. So again, providing interconnectivity internal there as far as that goes, and again, protecting the ability to put signals, which will help create gaps and help accommodate the anticipated traffic generated by this. With that, and again, I know drainage was a huge issue brought up at the meeting, and I'm going to let Mr. Huddleston address that in more detail with you.
Was he really expecting me to say that?
Good evening, Chairman Lamb and members of the Planning Commission. I'm Bill Huddleston, President of Huddleston Steel Engineering here in Murfreesboro. We've been hired as engineers for this project. A couple of years ago, though, we were hired by the City of Murfreesboro to look at the drainage situation in North Murfreesboro. Basically, we were asked to look at the drainage basins along Memorial Boulevard all the way from Haynes Drive to Thompson Lane. At that time, we identified 25 drainage basins in this area, and we modeled each of those drainage basins and determined what improvements should take place for each drainage basin so that we could solve existing problems and also allow future development to occur. One of the drainage basins we looked at was drainage basin number 24, which is the drainage basin that occurs on the properties in question tonight. At that time, we determined that a drainage project had to take place, and I will try to explain that project to you now. What we're looking at is a drainage swale along the western boundary of these properties that are hoping to get rezoned tonight. That drainage swale will start at the southern end, and it will direct drainage to the north. Now, that drainage doesn't go anywhere right now, and the reason is because it gets higher as you go north before it gets lower. So what we will have to do is construct this drainage swale, but then we will have to put in a pipe through a hill. The Palmer house, if you will, actually sits on a hill, so we'll have to pipe through that in order to allow this drainage to continue north in the direction it needs to go. From that point, once we get through the hill and we go back to where the ditch, if we can provide a ditch, won't be that deep, we'll get to within 4 feet of the surface of the ground, and then we'll go back to a drainage swale, allowing that water to continue north. Then it will head northwest towards Regency Park, and then to the west on through a couple other pipes in a roadway. Then it'll hit a box culvert under Siegel Road just south of the high school, and ultimately to Hooper Bottom. In addition to that swale and those pipes, we'll have a series of detention and retention ponds along the way, probably about 3 of them. The first one would be before we get to the hill where the Palmer house is. The second one would be after that hill before the drainage heads northwest. And the third one would be just before those pipes at Regency Park Drive. Now, those ponds have a couple of things that they'll be doing. Number one, they'll be slowing down the water so that nothing gets overwhelmed downstream. And also, they will hold that storm water for at least 24 hours so that the sediment will be able to settle out of that storm water, and we'll have cleaner storm water headed towards Hooper Bottom. Now, independent of this zoning application, the city has hired our firm to conduct phase 2 of the drainage study for this basin number 24. And they did this for really about 3 reasons. Number one, the city realizes that this is more than just a localized problem, that it affects more than just one property, and in developing just one property, it won't get solved. It's going to take a number of properties to be a part of this solution, and so that is one reason the city has embarked on phase 2 of the study. Another reason is that they see this stormwater quality benefit is a regional benefit, so that in cleaning the stormwater and allowing it to get to Hooper Bottom, we'll have cleaner stormwater and it won't impact the environment as bad. And then the third reason that they embarked on this is because it would help a future Haynes Drive improvement. About 4 or 5 years ago, the city started a design for improvements to Haynes Drive, but that's about when the economy went south, and so the city determined there were other things that they needed to spend a limited amount of resources on, so they have not continued yet their design of Haynes Drive. But once that is back on the more immediate radar screen, the Haynes Drive drainage would have to go all the way to Sinking Creek. So you'd start out with pipes on the east, under the east end of Haynes Drive. As you go west, the pipes get bigger, and by the time we get to Sinking Creek, we'd have box culverts under Haynes Drive, which would be pretty expensive. So this improvement would allow us to divert some of that storm water from the east end of Haynes Drive, take it north along the western boundaries of these properties, and west, as I previously described, so that the pipes and the box culvert under Haynes Drive for that future roadway improvement would be cheaper. So as I said, we're working on phase 2 of this study, which basically is ironing out some details, ironing out inverts, making sure we've got the right pipe sizes, making sure we design the ponds as they need to be designed. And what that'll do is allow these properties to develop, depending on whether the city pays for it or there's some partnership with some future developers of these properties. But they will be able to this will be able to handle that drainage, but it'll also provide an opportunity to correct some drainage problems in the Palmer Heights subdivision, especially on the east side. So not only will we be providing the benefits that I've already said for drainage in this area, but it'll help the Palmer Heights situation as well. You can compare it to like when the city did the Big Ditch and the Little Ditch projects back in, I guess it was the 80s. The city constructed those. It allowed drainage to get out of that area along Rutherford Boulevard where we were having problems, but it also allowed future developments to occur. Now, I want to point out to you whether this improvement was going on or not. There's no way that we can develop any sort of project in this area without taking it back through Planning Commission, and in so doing, we will not be able to impact any neighbor of ours, especially the Palmer Heights situation. But given this improvement, we will not only be not hurting their situation, but we will be helping it. This time I'll be happy to answer any questions, or obviously I'll be available after the public hearing.
Mr. Huddleston, you said that you would go north with the drainage through the applicant's properties.
That's correct.
And then you would turn to the west. When you turn to the west to extend it through Palmer Heights and Regency Park, I guess is what you referred to, would that be along existing drainage easement lines or what?
Actually, it wouldn't go west through Palmer Heights. It would go northwest through an undeveloped property north of Palmer Heights, which we refer to as the Patton property. That is a natural drainage area along that cuts across that property from the southeast to the northwest. Once it leaves that property, yes, then it's in drainage easements all the way to Hooper Bottom.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Huddleston? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Murphy or Mr. Caldwell, do you have anything else?
Chairman, I don't think we really do. I think, I think there's some opportunities that exist with this property. Again, it's very unusual that you have this number of property owners that get together, that provide an opportunity to resolve some issues that exist out there. So I think that's a unique opportunity. And of course, that corridor's change. I think the justification is out there speaks for itself with the amount of commercial that's already developed along that corridor. So as much as anything, we just want to make ourselves available to answer any questions as you go through the public hearing. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Adlott, do you have any comments at this time? Okay.
No, sir.
Okay. Any comments or questions from members of the Planning Commission? I'm sure we'll have plenty. Okay. Before I open the public hearing, let me remind everybody we've got quite a few people here that would like to speak. So in order to get everybody up at a reasonable hour, please keep your comments brief, to the point, and we will observe the 3-minute time limit. With all that being said, I'll open the public hearing at this time and invite anybody to come forward that would like to speak either for or against this proposal. Please state your name and give your address. Thank you.
My name is Ron Niebuhr. We live at 3019 Ridgewood Drive. As I said, my name is Ron Niebuhr. Myself, my wife, and I have lived at 3019 Ridgewood Drive for the past 21 years, since 1992. I am opposed to rezoning this property on Memorial without a defined and detailed plan, and I am certainly opposed to directing more water to the easement that ends near Ridgewood Drive, as part of this easement is against the back part of my property. We became concerned about the amount of water coming into this easement back in the early 1990s because of all the growth and new residential construction that we knew would be coming, and because we were advised the water would be directed to this easement. No one was aware at that time that there would be 3 new schools built in close proximity to each other with a lot of water directed into the easement. We've had Joseph Adelot, A.J. Bahu, Cy Weiser in our backyard a couple times back in the 1990s, and we've had Mr. Hayes and Sam Huddleston all in our backyard also. The City of Murfreesboro Engineering and the Corps of Engineers came and did separate studies back in 1994. They took measurements and made 4 recommendations, and the city chose option number 1, which was to do nothing. I would like to invite any of the commission to come and actually see the easement now, review the measurements the Corps did back in 1994, and see what the effects of the city's decision to do nothing back in 1994 and 1995 has made to the easement and the properties adjacent to it. The city should have the responsibility for having someone take new measurements, monitor the measurements and do sinkhole capacity studies, because the easement is an estimated 2 to 4 times larger and wider in most areas than it was in the early 1990s. My notes from 1994 state that one of the sinkholes was 12 inches in diameter and has grown to an estimated 3.5 to 4 foot in diameter today. I cannot imagine how much larger, wider, and deeper all of this will be in the next 10 years if you direct more water to this location. I would request the city review all of the information to determine a way to prevent more erosion from the current amount of water being directed to this easement, and certainly stop any plans that would direct more water to this easement. We invite any of you to come out and actually see the easement and what it's done. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Don't be shy.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Wilson. I live at 3023 Regionwood, next to the Nebors. I figured I would come up now so we could present our unified front. I had brought a CD of photos from my backyard, but I understand that you have to give notice in advance, but I am willing to leave it with the Planning Commission to have it put in the file. I haven't lived there nearly as long as Mr. Nebor. My concern is that right now in that easement behind my house, I would say it's approximately 100 to 200 yards long. And right now, after last Saturday's rain, it was initially more like 15 feet deep. I would say now it's about 13 feet deep, about 50 feet from my back door. I know that I have it, and also the roots of trees are exposed, the trees fall. I have a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, and I'm concerned that they're going to drown back there. And also, I know that I have a drainage easement behind my house. I knew that when I purchased the property. I mean, it's not like I went into the situation blind. What I didn't understand was that I had like a raging river behind my house that was there more often than it was not. In the summer, I understand that it's dry. We haven't lived there an entire year yet. But right now, it is just completely out of control. The drainage plans that I've seen, Mr. Sam Huddleston came over to our house last week, and we appreciate him coming, and he was very informative, and he stayed for a long time, and I do appreciate that. And he's emailed us since then. But the plans that he showed us, currently most of the water from Regency Park flows through easements that ultimately end up in my backyard and Mr. Nebor's backyard. I understand that the drainage plan that's proposed is to put even more water in this area, and it's an area that is already seriously overburdened. By overburdened, I mean when you have a drainage easement in your backyard, at some point you have to say that it is no longer reasonable to continue to add more water to that. I mean, you go from a ditch to a lake at some point, and we are close to the lake level. I would like to ask that they do not direct any more water there. In the absence of that, I would ask that they at least put up a fence of some kind to keep my kids away from the water. In addition to that, there's a sewer pipe that runs across my property that kids walking back and forth from Siegel High School to every morning and every afternoon. That's also a hazard because underneath them is about 5 or 6 feet of water at that point, and I'm concerned about that as well because I'm afraid that, what happens to somebody who gets hurt on my property in that enormous drainage easement. So anyway, I'm not fundamentally opposed to redeveloping this area. In fact, a Starbucks on that corner would make my life significantly better, but I am fundamentally opposed to requiring me and my neighbor to bear the brunt of progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson.
I'll leave this here.
Yes, ma'am.
My name is Jake Robinson. I live at 5128 MacArthur Avenue in Murfreesboro. Some of the questions I'm not opposed to development. However, I am opposed to, I have some questions that I would like to hear you guys discuss. I don't think you'll answer my questions directly, but I've heard tonight there's an opportunity, a rare opportunity to bring multiple landowners together for this design. And the question I have, is there a project before the development? If the landowners have an opportunity to develop this 89 acres, are they doing it as a team or a group? Or are they just getting their zoning done as a team? And that's totally two entirely different outcomes. If they get all zoned together, that might be good, but are they going to, at that point, sell off their properties individually or in groups? Or is it just first come, first serve on who wants to develop what in that area. So the question is, if this is a rare opportunity to be able to take care of this drainage problem in a bigger area, is that going to be because we're going to pay for a project before anybody comes in as a commercial development and purchases that property? In other words, are we going to pass this zoning and then we're going to hire Mr. Huddleston to do the design, and we're going to actually go in and do the work to change the drainage and put those easements in, that barrier and drainage ditch? Is that what we're going to do? If that is what we're going to do, my question is, who pays for that? Is that going to be coming out of taxpayer dollars or from public funds? Because if that's the case, I want to know where I can sign up to get some of that money to improve my property. I understand that there was a discussion between the joint meeting between the city council and the planning department that an idea was floated that we might want to purchase some type of special pavers so that the water can flow through, et cetera, and we're going to use money out of the storm and water drain fee that comes off our water bill. If that's the case, I'm opposed to that. When Walmart comes in or any other company comes in, generally they have the burden to take care of the improvements on their land. Now, if you guys require those companies when they come in to reimburse the city for any of the costs that's associated with any construction that may be done to improve the marketing ability of this 89 acres, I might be okay with that. But that would have to be above and beyond what they're going to pay for anyway. Otherwise, I want my share too. There's something called equal treatment under the law. And you can't say, well, we're going to take money from all these folks over here and ship in from our tax money to benefit these 11 landowners because it looks good for the city and we can solve a few problems for an area. It needs to be borne from private. If it's a private transaction, those costs need to be borne by the private community. The other question I have is, I heard that there's not going to be any more problems, or we're not going to add to any downstream issues with flooding or drainage. So if all of this changes that we're going to make will not allow additional water like some of these landowners are concerned about, does that mean that they're going to improve the situation for those areas located outside of the 89 acres? The people who live downstream that already have water and have mosquitoes and the other things that they have issues with, is that going to remain at least that much problems that already exist, or will this actually improve it? And if it will actually improve it, there needs to be some kind of backup information to document this is how we're going to actually improve the situation. I like the idea that there might be retaining ponds that slow down the water, and maybe it would actually take some of the water off of the downstream. But we need to know that.
Mr. Robertson.
Okay. What I would ask you to do is consider that there's a lot of people tonight that still have a lot of questions to answer. I would ask you to table the vote tonight and postpone it and allow the community to engage with the officials, maybe even have additional public meetings so that we can get a lot of these questions answered, and maybe we could get behind this program. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Robertson. Who's next?
My name is Ron Merritt, and I live at 2503 Regency Park Drive, and it is on the corner of Haynes and Regency Park. Now, I compliment the city engineering department in a reconstruction of that roadway about 2-3 years ago. Because of rain and water, we used to have automobile accidents every day, or every time it rained, literally. And I'm talking about the stone signs that were demolished time and time again, besides a lot of cars being damaged and people hurt. The city did a great job on that. And then the issue that I have is Haynes Drive. It is mentioned in this this stuff that we got, the widening of Haynes Drive. Is that going to be going from Memorial all the way to Thompson Lane? And if it does, that requires more land, because they took a fair chunk of our land when they modified it here a couple years ago. And is that going to be all the way from Thompson Lane to Haynes? That's my question, or my comments about. I'd like to know if it's going to be a 4-lane or 5-lane or what, and if it's going to take up any more of my land.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Who's next?
Hello. My name is Carla Niebor, and I live at 3019 Regionwood Drive. My husband, as he stated, we have been there for 21 years. I am opposed to the rezoning of this property on Memorial without a defined and detailed plan, and I'm certainly opposed to directing more water to the easement behind our house at the end of Regionwood Drive. The map that we were shown shows that the flow of water goes along the path all the way to Hooper's Bottom. It just makes it look like it flows evenly, and it doesn't. The water flows to the end of Regionwood Drive, and then it stops and it sits in this easement that is approximately 8 foot lower than the surrounding yards until it can flow through the sinkholes and go underground and go into Hooper's Bottom. If it's dry, sometimes it'll go pretty quickly. If it's wet like it has been now, it sits there for weeks after weeks after weeks. There are no means to stop the debris or the trash from washing down the easement and going into the sinkholes, potentially clogging the sinkholes. This was also stated back in the study that the Corps did back in '94, but still nothing's been done by the city to keep that cleaned of trash and debris. If the sinkholes become clogged and water cannot drain, the water will back up, and a tremendous chance is there to flood properties back upstream. I would request that the city review all this information and determine a way to prevent more erosion with the current amount of water being directed to this easement, and certainly stop any plans to direct more water to this easement. The erosion that has happened over the last 21 years that we have lived there is just remarkable. The Corps took that study and there are measurements. I would ask that the city come out before they make any decisions and take measurements again, just to see in the 21 years that we have lived there how wide that has grown. It's tremendous. When we first moved there, you felt like you could jump across the easement. You can't even begin to think that now. So I would ask before you make any decisions, you come out there and you review where this water that you're wanting to dump more on already sits and has caused property damage. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Who's next?
Thank you. My name is Jack Murphy, and we live at 244 Newcastle Drive. We know that there is a definite need for developing the land facing Memorial Boulevard for commercial use. I think we've all that moved in there know this is going to happen. It should happen. But we want this to be done in a logical manner. I have two main concerns with what the proposal is right now. There are 7 pieces of property that face Haynes Drive. I see this as only being opportunistic by the people that live there. I don't know why this would be included in this study. There is enough land that faces Memorial to handle almost any development need. Also, there's almost 90 acres here, and as the other people have said too, you need a plan. You don't put the cart before the horse and say, trust me, give us the ability to build something there, and then take the control from our elected officials on what goes in there. As soon as we zone this commercial, we no longer have control. And whoever developed this land can put what they want there. So I think that we need a plan on what's going to be put in there, who's going to put it in there, and see what their plan is before we go ahead and approve this and make it commercial property. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Who's next?
Hi, I'm Kathleen Deneen. I live at 2810 Archer Avenue. The back of my house faces Memorial Drive. Right now I have just blank large tracts of land behind me. It's very nice. I've lived there since '78, and I understand that Memorial will eventually be commercial, but I, like the last gentleman, think that we need a plan before it is zoned commercial, and then we have no control. That's all I have.
Thank you, ma'am.
Is it possible to pass a handout, Joseph? Thank you. I would just direct your attention to the second page.
Okay. Please give us your name and address, sir.
Yes, sir. Here we go. My name is Patrick Jones. I live at 2614 Morgan Road. I lived in Palmer Heights, lot number 155. So as you get the piece of paper, you'll see yellow highlights, 155. When we purchased our home approximately 25 years ago, this was a residential area, and the adjacent property was also zoned RS-15 residential. Now a residential area will be next to a commercial area. Well, clearly I'm concerned about the environmental impact. I've never had water under my house, and I do have concerns about flooding. Commission members, I have a swing set, playhouse, and above-ground pool in my backyard. I have 5 grandchildren, and my wife and I spend many days outside playing with or watching them. The 35-foot under discussion sounds real good, 35 feet. That's basically 11.6 yards. I have a serious question for the Planning Commission. If you lived in a residential area for approximately 25 years, if you found out your residential neighborhood would soon be part residential, part commercial, looking at the diagram on the second page, looking at lot number 155, if you have a short backyard that would now back up to commercial, and if you were told you'll have an 11.6 yard drainage buffer, how would you feel? Tom, your company slogan is like a good neighbor. Ken, Miller and Lowry has my home insurance and car insurance. Doug, my neighbor of many years ago. If you believe an 11.6 drainage buffer is a good idea for somebody who has a short backyard, then tell me to stand down. But if not, I ask your help in providing additional space. Lots 16, 17, 27, 28, 29, and 30 have property lines deeper than mine. My neighbor on one side, Wayne Kemp, lot 156, and I have lots that are not very deep. If at all possible, and if we could afford it, we'd love to purchase additional space, but if not, we request a buffer that exceeds 11.6 yards. I appreciate Joseph's honesty at the neighborhood meeting. I asked him this question: what impact do you think this will have on the neighborhood? He said this: I don't know. I don't think your property will go up. I think the value of your property will go down. Having said that, I have planes overhead. My property value is going down. I ask you, please, 11.6 yards, I'd appreciate an extra buffer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
My name is Edwin Florida. I live at 2706 Archer Avenue. Been there for 19 years. First, I'd like to see you move the seats about 3 inches further apart so I wouldn't step on so many people coming out. Thank you for the opportunity to voice my opinion on the matter of rezoning of properties in the 89 acres fronting Haynes Drive and Memorial Boulevard. I am not opposed to any of the property owners selling their properties, but I've seen no listing or signs of any type on any of the properties that would indicate they are for sale. Being a property owner that shares a line with the requested changes concerns me greatly. One of the largest financial investments my family has made outside of business has been our home. We hope someday our home will be a benefit to our children, just like many of the properties and those owners that are requesting rezoning. Again, I do not oppose my neighbors selling their property, and I hope they gain great profits, but not at the expense of the reduction of value of my own property. A real estate agent has been quoted that 3 home buyers have already taken Palmer Heights and Regency Park off their preferred list because of the possibility of the rezoning. That stated, I would prefer that their current zoning not change. If any of the owners receive an offer that would require rezoning, then let us revisit that need then and allow the neighbors appropriate time to respond and to retain proper legal assistance. If you decide to proceed with the rezoning, then I would like to address the one piece of property that Mr. Jones just mentioned. I would like to take an eraser to part of your canvas. There's 2 acres that jut out on the map right behind 2706 Archer and Mr. Jones and Mr. Kemp and also Mr. McVicker. All 4 of us have interest in the possibility of purchasing any or all of the approximately 2 acres that jut out. If you erase that, that would completely straighten the line on the back of all the properties. But I would prefer that we either postpone or not rezone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Florida. Anybody else?
Good evening. I'm Joan Clark Mann. I live at 407 Haynes Drive. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I respectfully ask that you do not rezone the homes and the properties on Haynes Drive. I am outside that part that was in your map, but I will be greatly affected. And I, like the others, realize that progress will be made and it cannot be stopped. If it is made, I hope that it will be step by step and planned very well. And I know some of the people who've spoken to us tonight, I know them and know that they will see that is done, and I hope that will be done. A few things I wanted to mention, and I'll just start at the top of my list here. The commercialization will decrease the values in our homes. And I know a lot of people here are like I am. My life savings and what I've worked for are in my little home. And I am retired and past the time when I can recoup such losses. And I don't want to move. I've done some improvements on my home. And, I'm asking myself now, why did I do that? Why did I put that money into that? The widening of Haynes Drive will destroy the trees and maybe destroy one of the last tree-rich neighborhoods in Murfreesboro, which, in my way of thinking, being a history buff and loving the heritage of Murfreesboro, I view it as destroying some of the heritage of Murfreesboro, and a sad reflection upon our city, in my opinion. Destroying the trees in my front yard, they're not very pretty to anybody but me, but they're my barrier between the street and me. Their removal will decrease my safety and feeling of security, decrease the pleasantness and shade of the trees. Widening Haynes Drive will increase traffic and speed. It's difficult and dangerous now to get out on Haynes Drive during rush hour. 6 to 8 a.m. and 4 to 7 p.m. cars are speeding by. I have to go out there and wait a while between cars and kind of watch before I go out and get my mail. And I think of that woman out there who was working in her flower garden one day and the car went by and killed her right there. So I'm very careful about getting close to the street there. I don't feel safe close to the street a lot of the times, but especially during those hours. Then there's the issue of lot size, taking so many feet. And I've already had a little thing driven down in my yard about 25 feet from, I didn't measure it, but I'd say 20, 25 feet from Haynes Drive. That was done back when someone mentioned 4 or 5 years ago when we all went over to Consolidated Utility and talked about this. And so at that time, nobody told me why they drove it in there, but I'm thinking they had a reason for it. Then will the city have the right to come and take another 20 feet? Where does it end? And then there's the issue of noise. I've already considered I'll have to move to the back of my house. My bedroom's in the front, but I'm going to have to move to the back because of the noise. And then I think, how close am I to that street and all that fast traffic? Then I'll quickly go on. I didn't mean to speak so long. I should have practiced this like I taught my students. Increased crime with development crime, decrease of security, quality of life, water. Everybody's talked about water. I agree with it all. I have railroad ties that floated in what used to be my garden, and with the all the building, every time there's a building commercial, it increases. So I respectfully request that nothing be done unless it's totally, totally planned, stage by stage, where the water is going to go, so that, okay, we're just in stage 1, so we can't help that water that's coming to your yard. And by the way, I've had somebody to follow that ditch and clean that out. It's not cleaned out. Anyway, that's my say. Plan it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Pat Levin, and I'm an urban planner with Kistick's Design Studio. I'm speaking on behalf of my sister, Carolyn Jones, who resides at 2614 Morgan Road, adjacent to the subject property. As a surrounding residential property owner, I am concerned with the incompatible relationship with the highway commercial zoning with the existing single-family homes. Without some type of PUD zoning site plan, there is no way to address the relationship of buildings, loading areas, noise, and other concerns. The existing provision for a 15-foot wide buffer is not adequate, even with the additional 20-foot drainage. This rezoning has the potential to degrade the property values of all homes abutting the site. Several homes, such as mine, are shorter in dimension to other homes and will be impacted more severely. We see two viable options. One, propose a site plan binding zoning district, such as a PUD or a planned development district. The provision for buffering can be addressed with walls and vegetation or a transition to a less intensive form of commercial, such as one-story office, professional office adjacent to residential. Nuisance activities such as loading docks, dumpster storage, all of that could be located to provide minimum impact. A binding site plan can allay many of the concerns of the neighborhood. Or two, if a planned development is not feasible, then compatibility concerns might be addressed by leaving a 100-foot wide strip along all of our homes in its current zoning class or in an equivalent single-family category. This strip could be used for drainage and buffer requirements, but it would prohibit parking, loading docks, or tall buildings from being built too close to an established single-family neighborhood. While we acknowledge that the road frontage may be justified for non-residential use, it is not a foregone conclusion that this rezoning must extend all the way to the existing established neighborhood. Either of these strategies would afford reasonable protection from commercial encroachment into our neighborhood. If the applicant is unwilling to address either of these options, we have no choice but to urge you to deny this application pending a more reasonable and predictable development expectation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Levin. Who's next?
Good evening. My name is Greg Thompson. I live at 2736 Jim Houston Court, which is halfway down Haynes Drive in the Jameson Place neighborhood. So we've lived in Murfreesboro for 17 years. It's been a pretty great experience to live here, and we've watched the progress, especially with the gateway areas, and it's been a really nice addition to the city. I think what's unique about that area in northwest Murfreesboro is a lot different than other parts of the city. You got lots of trees, you've got very residential oriented, and it's a kind of unique area. I think we need to be very, very careful about really disrupting. I think we need to listen very closely to the issues of water. I wasn't affected even by the storm of a couple of years ago, but there's lots of water in that area every time it rains. So before we head off and do something significant, I think you need to listen to the residents in the area who really are affected by this. And I think the third thing is to really think about memorial development overall. I think there's a couple areas in town like Northwest Broad and Church Street, which is really, it's really kind of a blight on the community, just as rough and as just unplanned, and it's tough to look at. The company that I work for, Schneider Electric, we actually have about 1,000 people in the Nashville area, and we're actually looking for an area to build, a common office. Murfreesboro is one of those, and so you got to be thinking about how to attract companies. And turning Memorial into another Broad Street, unplanned, no trees, it's really bland, is not going to attract, a lot of residents and additional companies coming into the area. So I think you really got to think about the specialness of the area, think about, the drainage, think about the long-term planning, and to really think about how make it a unique area that integrates well with what you have today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
Hi, my name is Kay Bunn. I live at 2814 Archer Avenue. I've lived there 20-some years. And I'm against the rezoning of Haynes Drive. I would like to see a development plan before it is zoned commercial, if it is going to be. I'm concerned about the water drainage since my property has standing water every time after a heavy rain. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Chairman Lamb, Commissioners, my name is Jock Rucker. I live at 763 Regal Drive. What has been presented to you tonight is a statement that this is a unique opportunity to address some issues that are relevant to the land on Memorial Boulevard. And I would respectfully suggest to you that perhaps another way of looking at that is that there is no way this land can be rezoned commercial highway unless you do it all in one lump sum. I think that is a dangerous route to follow. I think what you've heard from numerous people here tonight is that by going forward with this rezoning of this large tract to commercial highway, you lose control and the citizens lose control over how it will be developed in the future. Now, that's not absolute control, but you lose a lot of the options you have to control that development later on when you zone it commercial highway and it sits for any number of years. We experienced the same difficulty with the land that was zoned commercial highway in the 80s that the Walmart was just approved for on Memorial Boulevard. We faced the issue with the planning commissioners when we talked with them in the planning department with statements such as it's already zoned commercial highway as long as they meet the requirements of someone bringing some expert in to say the traffic is okay, bringing someone in to say we can control the drainage, all of that, then you've lost control and you're not able to respond to the citizens as much as you would be by deferring this until what you've heard from a lot of people, and that is, let's see what a development it looks like before you blanketly zone this much land commercial highway and lose the ability to have some additional level of control of what's put in there. You've heard, I will not repeat, as has been requested, all of the concerns I have with traffic and drainage and property values and everything else. But those are very legitimate concerns, and it's certainly legitimate, and it needs to really be looked at before you make a decision about the neighbor's property and what goes on behind the property. I'm familiar with that. I live in the neighborhood, and it really needs some more looking at before you make the decision on this rezoning this property. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rucker.
Well, you know, I don't really want to run to be a councilman. You know that? You guys serve this community very well, and I thank you for your efforts and your times. And my name is Bob Webb, and I live at 2714 Archer Avenue. I butt up right against the property. My father-in-law was Dick Palmer. My wife is behind me here, Nancy, and my brother-in-law Dick Palmer, and he's next door to me. And then I got another brother-in-law here, is Bill Palmer, who's has an interest in this as well. And then I have my neighbors that are here that have expressed their feelings about it. And you know, there's nothing in life that stays the same. Nothing. You're either green and growing or ripe and dying. Look at the earth. Look at ourselves. And so, if you're using the talents of experts, i.e. the gentlemen that have come over here and made their presentation to you about how we can do this and do this right, no commercial entity is going to come and say, can we get this rezoned? You've got to get it rezoned, and then they can come, and then you have that opportunity to make the dictates as to how you want it. So I'm sure of the way this city has grown and the way in which you all have designed it, implemented it, you've done a great job. I thank you for that. And Doug, you lived right down the street from me and growing up as a boy, and I know your daddy, and so things have just. I thank you again for what you do. I am in favor of this. I am in favor that we were able to control this, that you, the team, can control how this property will ultimately look. I want it to really be first class. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Webb.
Powell McClellan, 403 Westchester Court. To follow up on his issues, in 1984, this was rezoned, and Mr. Adlot and the engineer, and the drainage, there was a problem at that time. And evidently, they ignored it. The city did nothing. And now we have the same engineer who made the mistakes before. I don't know about the planning commission fellow, but I really think it might be a good idea to bring in a different engineer and a different planner that would look at it from a different way rather than just continuing the same. And I am for a planned development.
Thank you, sir. Who's next?
This will be extremely brief. I live at 2611 Morgan Road, and my name is Jim Tune. I believe I probably am the senior citizen on that particular street. I've been there 30 years. Haven't heard a number bigger than that tonight.
78.
All right, well, good. I'm glad somebody had things in good shape for me to come. I would very simply like to say that as presently proposed, a zoning change with no plan in place for what's going to happen, I strongly oppose. Please, let's plan first and then make our changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens.
Hello, my name is Christopher Dillahay. I live at 1044 Barfield Church Road, but I'm here on behalf of my mother-in-law, Betty Baskin, who lives at 2510 Morgan Road. She's been there for mid-70s, I know for sure. My wife grew up there, and my two little girls still go over there a couple times a week. But the things that I'm hearing tonight, I think that there's a lot of concerns, essentially. And I think because of those concerns and because of sort of the ambiguity of what they're proposing, I strongly urge that this decision either be postponed or denied. I think that because of the size of the project, there's a large suspicion that there's a large development in the works. When that many homeowners get together, it's usually for a reason. I know that change is inevitable. Change is going to happen. I've been in the design field for 25 years myself, so in some ways I could be cutting my own throat. However, I think that change should be carefully looked at before it's approached. I know it's inevitable, but it should be progress, not regress. There was a plan in place that's currently in place of how this land was to be used. I think that plan has been used very efficiently. They've come to you with an appeal to change that plan to something else, yet no one's saying what that something else is going to be, that it's just another large development. My mother-in-law, she can't be here tonight, but she is quite livid about the potential of extra water flowing into the lake that's often behind her house already, about the traffic, about the noise, about potential light and sound and there's just a lot of issues that need to be addressed. But, you know, this sort of speaks to the planning process as a whole, but, you know, a developer, when they come to ask for change on a particular property, especially something that could be as significant as this, that change should be, it should be spelled out. It should be, I think the people that are impacted directly by it should be brought on board. They should be convinced that this is something, that this is a benefit to them, that it improves their life, it makes it more convenient, it raises their property value, some sort of benefit. And I really don't see how that has happened yet. And if those immediate people impacted are not convinced, and they still feel that the community as a whole should be convinced, then they should appeal to the entire community to stand up on their behalf and to say that, hey, this is something that we want. This is something that's going to help us. It's going to benefit us. It's going to raise our public awareness. You know, whenever we change something or anytime we build something. Like I said, I've been in the design and construction world for quite a while, and this stuff should be taken seriously. The things that we build are going to be here long after we're gone. It's going to be here for our children and for our grandchildren. Whenever you look at a civilization, you look first at their architecture and their planning to understand what that civilization cared about. So I urge you to find out what's going to go here. And when that is proposed, I think that it needs to be brought before the people that are in this community. It needs to be brought to them in such a way that they feel that it is a benefit to them, that it is something that they're going to, their lives are going to be enhanced by. I know during the proposal he used, he wanted, this is going to be unified, it's going to be well-defined design, it's going to have continuity of design, ultimate good to adjoining and neighborhood, only the logical use of this corner. The only logical use of this corner, it's been used for a while, okay. But again, I urge you to postpone this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your comments.
Members of the council, I'm Janine Lassiter. I own the property at 2603 Memorial with my sister, Lady Fan, and I am responsible for gathering all these people together to apply for this commercial zoning. There are a lot of issues, and I understand that change is hard, and from the information that I've been given over the past 10 years, we've got a really bad water problem on this property. And Publix tried to buy it, and someone from out of town came in and wanted to basically put it on stilts. And it was denied very fast. And Bill Huddleston told me at the time that he had a plan, and he felt that because of his work in town over the years that he knew, and he was very familiar with this whole area. And he said one day, you know, when it comes back around, let's just see if we can't try to do this right. And I have faith in Bill Huddleston. I know that Bill Huddleston fixed a big drainage problem across the street where Bradford Place is. When the Texas developers came in and they developed that, there was basically a lake there. And Mr. Henry and Bill came in and put a pipe in a certain place and piped that excess water over to Stones River. And I think all the neighbors there are very, very, very happy with that. I went down Morgan Road the other day on Sunday, and I noticed a lot of water. And I know that that's a problem, and that those property values are not well if there's water in their backyard. And if we can get this done where we can drain this property, enhance a big corner that is not commercial when the other three corners are. I've been told that we need all these people together so that if we could zone this commercial, that a large development would come in and look at it and take it seriously. At this point, we can't really get anyone interested in it. I mean, if you drive by it, no one is interested in what is there right now. And it's going to stay like that if we don't do something. And when I went to these other property owners, I started out with the Palmers and the Vaughns, Belchers, who were interested a long time ago when Publix was interested. The Sanders were interested. They were on the corner. They were very interested then. And then their property starts to go down Haynes a little bit. And then the Vaughn property makes an L. And then the Clarks were interested in this because they know that they have a big, big yard. The Frosts now live at Stones River Manor, and both of them, and I know their family would really like to see something that they can be proud of be developed on this corner. So it's when we started asking the different people to join us, it was based on these type of considerations that we'd had before. So I hope that you all will have faith in our experts, and I hope that you all will consider that this is a very, very good potential fix for the water and the drainage. And I hope you will approve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lester. Anybody else?
Good evening, Chairman Lamb, Commissioners. Appreciate the opportunity to come speak. I'm Tom Davis. I live at 502 Bluebell, and we're nearly in my backyard now. As I mentioned the last couple of times I was here that I saw this coming. Y'all know what I'm going to say. I could probably make it easy and say what I said the last time. I still mean it, but I'm not going to make it that easy. And as you can tell, we get it. I mean, we understand there's a lot of issues in this area. It's a complicated area. There's a lot of problems. It's a complicated world. There's drainage issues, incipient traffic issues. They're all out there. And we understand. We get it. And we're not opposed to development. We understand that this area is going to have some sort of commercial or office or whatever development to it. We know it. That's fine. We're not against our neighbors turning their property and making a dollar. That's fine, the American way. What I'm against, and I have been, and I still am, is the process by which this is being done in the city of Murfreesboro. This seemingly never-ending process of approving rezonings to commercial highway without requiring a planned development. The issue with it is whether it's designed to or not, what it does is it silences us. It shuts us up because we get a crack at the Planning Commission, we get a crack at the City Council, but once it's rezoned, we don't get to look at anything. We have no more voice. We're silenced, disenfranchised. The word I like to use is neutered because it's got more oomph, you know. But all of a sudden, we have no more say in the process, and I'm against it. We don't know that something's bad is going to come of this. We don't know that something good is going to come of it. All we can do is quote, paraphrase the bard, by the prickling of my thumb, something wicked this way comes, but I don't know what it is. You've got Bill Huddleston working on a private project, working on a city project in this area. I'm wondering if we're using my hard-earned tax dollars doing engineering studies to benefit a few landowners for a development that I may or may not like. But I don't know because I'm not going to get a chance to see it if we do it this way. You're out there soliciting other landowners to join in it and planning additional study areas for people that weren't involved for a development that I may or may not like. But I don't know because I'm not going to get a chance to see it and make comments before it gets into place if this process continues. That's concerned me in the past, and it still concerns me. I see studies. I see it looks like it's going to be designed. It's going to be planned. You don't know what's going there. How can you plan anything if it's just a blank sheet? My understanding is, they're going for a bulk rezoning. All these properties can be sold individually. We could get 11 different developments on here. What kind of a design is that? What kind of a plan is that? How do you design something when you can't look at it? And we don't get a chance to comment. And that's what I'm against. I have been, I will be, I always will be. I'm not going to sit down and be quiet. I'm not built that way. I know Mr. Adelot has said in the past that he doesn't have enough staff to handle planned developments. The city can fix that. That's an easy fix. You got to look at a site plan sometime. Why not beforehand, then after it's rezoned and you're looking at the site plan? This property is going to sell. If the landowners are getting together and they want to sell it, this is a multi-million-dollar one-armed bandit on that corner ready to rock and roll. And if they have the ability to tell the developers, we've met with our neighbors, we've met with the landowners, we're in agreement of what we want to see and what we don't want to see, the neighbors want to be involved, but they'll be positive and constructive, this property will sell and it'll develop. We just need to do it right. The only thing I keep hearing, Memorial's not the two-lane cow path it used to be. And I agree with some previous speakers. The secret to the universe is everything changes. That's the secret to the universe. When I moved here 7 years ago, I went to get my water hooked up at the water department. The young lady did not recognize my street. The woman next to her said, "Oh, that's in Palmer Heights. You don't see that very much. People don't move out of there. They only change hand when people die." And that's true in large part. When I moved here 7 years ago after Katrina, I looked at that area and I knew it was going to be developed.
Mr. Davis.
I was hoping for an office. Don't think I'm going to get it. But there's some people here who have lived there for 30 years. And I asked 75 people the other night, have any of the landowners come and talk to you about what they're going to do? One out of 75. That's not neighborly. We need to sit down and do this together. We need to table it, sit down, talk about it, and do it as neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Anybody else?
Hello, my name is Steve Frost, and I'm here on behalf of my parents, John and Martha Frost, who own the property at 206 Haynes Drive. In 1966, they bought 2 lots, built a house in the middle of it, and had lived there for some 45 plus years. When we moved there, Haynes Drive was a gravel road. The city limits was, it ended at the airport entrance as well as the street lights. It was a rural agricultural area, and of course we see what it is today. At that time it was just a few people in the community. Our house was one of the first 2 built on the road. Now we have a post office close by, which is wonderful. When we first moved there, we didn't even have delivery on Haynes Drive. Our mailbox was out on the 2-lane Memorial Boulevard. We've seen a lot of changes over the years. At the time, there were no schools in our immediate area. There's no Oakland High School. Now there's Oakland High School, or Oakland Schools, Siegel Schools, post office nearby, grocery stores, and just assisted living areas, just a multiple, I guess, array of goods and services available to our community. I feel like that we do have an opportunity now to collectively work toward providing additional goods and services to our community. I live just within 2 miles of my folks' property. I would like to see some nice restaurants close by, some upscale shopping areas. I know some of the folks at Stones River Manor, when they like to, some of them still like to go shopping, but they have to load up on a bus and go across the other side of town. I know they would enjoy having some nice areas to attend and shop, and some other goods and services available that they would have close by instead of having to travel across town. I would like to see this done collectively within mind keeping things in an upscale way. I don't want to see anything go in there that would be a detriment to our community. I do feel like that the water issues can be addressed. I know when the Rite Aid store, actually it was the Eckards, I believe, before, but the Rite Aid store sits now on what used to be about 10 or 15 feet below the level of Memorial Boulevard. So I think there were some issues, concerns when it was developed. Where was that water going to go when it's built up street level and everything else is lower? From what I've been able to see, it looks like that was well addressed and taken care of. And with the group effort that we have in place now, I have the same feeling that can come about in this area as well.
Thank you, Mr. Frost. Who would like to be next?
I would like to say thank you for this meeting with the Planning Committee. I am Jean Vaughn, and I live 2527 Memorial, directly across from State Farm. I moved here with my mom and dad in 1949, and they built the house that we now live in 1961. And so I've seen a lot of changes since 61, even though Howard and I have only lived there about 10 years. And I remember when it was a 2-lane road to Lebanon. House across the street where State Farm is now located was high on a hill, and now we have 7 lanes of traffic in front of our house. So I'm not opposed to traffic because I know what traffic is like. So I know there'll be an issue with Haynes. We also have an issue with water. We've always had one, even when Mother and Daddy lived there. And so right now, I saw ducks going across Sunday morning. Our garden is still underwater, and so I know there is a water issue. And I would love to see the water problem worked out, not just for us, but for all the people in Palmer Heights and anybody else that's in that area that has a severe water problem, and there is one. I have enough confidence in the Planning Commission and the members that I know that they will not allow something to come in unless there is a plan, because there's enough information that I know that there is a plan in progress, and I've got enough confidence in the Planning Commission and just also Joseph A. Lott. So to know that they're not going to allow just something that's not beneficial to the town of Murfreesboro. So I am definitely in for the approval of the zoning.
Thank you, Ms. Vaughn.
Gracious good evening, Chairman Lamb, members of the Planning Commission, Mr. Adelon, staff. I couldn't resist the opportunity to get up and speak. Charlotte Quinn, 318 Westchester Court, Regency Park. As you are, if you will remember, over the past 4 or 5 years, I've come before you several times. My property is a property attached to Terry Haynes at the southwest corner, and you might wonder why I'm here to speak for anything at the other end. I came to you tonight because I have questions, and there's zoning questions, and what better place to come to get my answers? Okay, first question. Why was Office General not a classification that you thought of with this property, or that was mentioned to us in the homeowners meeting we had with Joseph A. Lott and the Planning Department? Seems to me Office General would be a good fit, particularly when you have residential homes, and I would like to find out the answer to that. The second thing, this past July of 2012, we attended, and I've not missed any of the public meetings in 5 years that anybody's held, these informational meetings. This past July, I talked to Ken Ayers, I believe the man's name was, for the rezone issue on Memorial to build the 4-story apartments. And he told us, he was very aggressively informing us that at an intersection, you do not want commercial highway as your zone, because it creates a lot of traffic. The property I'm talking about was the Richard Siegel property that was rezoned from commercial highway to residential multifamily. I think it's RM16, where they can build apartments rather than develop it as commercial. And they were very aggressive in telling us you do not want to place the burden of commercial highway on that busy intersection because of all that traffic. Fast forward 10 months later, here we are at our other very busy intersection. And the other day I was thinking, now wait a minute. Here we have RS15, and they want to go commercial highway, when at that other meeting, that was a big no-no. We had to get away from commercial highway and go to residential. And that's what led me to my first question. Rather than create more traffic flow, it seems to me common sense would say Office General might be a better selection. And I need to know, or I want to know, is that going to be considered, and why was there not any continuality here? Why am I told at Thompson Lane in Memorial that commercial highway is a big no-no, but I go down to the other end of Memorial there at D. Jarnett and Haynes, and we have banners waving. We've got to have commercial highway. I'll end with my statement. I'm adamantly, vehemently opposed to those stubbed streets that sit in Regency in Palmer Heights. I'm adamantly, vehemently opposed if in this plan at any time someone comes down the pike and says, we need to open that up. We need to open that up. I thank you for your time and attention, and yet another opportunity to come before you.
Thank you very much. It's always good to see you.
Members of the council, I'm Randy Fan. I'm married into the family. I'm Sam Lassiter's son-in-law. I just want to say there's a couple of issues I've heard raised tonight that they're losing control as the public. If you pass this zoning tonight, I've been involved in a few small commercial developments, and I can assure you every document that comes out of any commission is subject to staff comments. And that keeps somebody from closing Guantanamo Bay and moving it on the corner of Memorial and Haynes. That's the control the public has. And I just wanted to make people comfortable in that, knowing that that's the control the people have over that. Number two, the money. It's going to cost a lot of money to drain this. Infrastructure. I've been involved in commercial developments where, for instance, a Walgreens just the other side of the North Carolina line, they didn't want to wait for the state to resolve an issue with two intersections. They put it in themselves. Didn't have a problem with paying $250,000 for those two traffic lights. Right now, in a hurry, ready to open. If we rezone this, we'll attract people like that. They're not going to have a problem spending impact money. Getting the drainage done, we've got the best that I know of handling that. Even if the city were to foot the whole bill, would it be conservative to say in a couple of years' time they retail $10 million? The city gets 5% of that, $500,000 in a couple of years, 4 or 5 years, you got your money back. I want an investment like that. I think it would be irresponsible for the Planning Commission to not seriously consider what an opportunity this is. The money's available. Retail sales is available. People are looking for property now. They're wanting to get a good deal, and you'll never get as many people involved in one high-traffic corner as this to resolve all the traffic issues. all the drainage issues, all the buffering issues, all in one fell swoop. Now is the time. I ask you to zone this commercial as it should be.
Thank you, Mr. Fan. Anybody else care to speak?
Hello, my name's Chris Burnham at 2807 Archer Avenue. I've only lived there within less than a year. We moved to the area because of the area as it is. Unfortunately, we've sat in this meeting for going on 2 hours, and it's called a planning commission, and I haven't seen a plan yet. With the rest of the people here is saying I'm opposed to this because there is no plan. If it had a plan and we were sitting here, I think most everybody here understands it's probably going to be commercial at some point. And I think we would all be singing praises instead of being opposed to it if we saw, you know, the water problems getting taken care of, the traffic problems and that type of thing. So I also wanted to point out, too, that not only am I opposed without a plan for the properties that they're talking about, what the city has also looked at to include as well, that I'm not too keen on that either. Based on past history of seeing that types of things, and the young lady was pointing out the stubs. Looks like to me that, you know, there's opportunities for the city to benefit as well, you know, extending the roads and bringing it into our neighborhood as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, committee, my name's Tom Jemison. I live at 232 Inverness Drive. I've been there about 22 years. It's in the Long Meadow development. So we'll be about the first left turn after the entrance to the back door of this new development. At 7:45 in the morning, you can't get out of that development. It's one way out right now. So I can imagine with the traffic that this is going to add, we'll have to invest in some kind of helicopter or something to get out. The other thing that's pertinent to the other people that are going to live on the back of this new development, where I live, our property kind of butts up to the Kroger shopping center. And there's a little field there, but there's no buffer. And when they drop those dumpsters at about 3 in the morning, it's really a lot of fun. So if the people don't like to hear that, you're going to put loading docks backing up on all that property. I don't think 25 feet or 40 feet or 50 feet is going to make any difference from when they start dropping dumpsters. Maybe they have rubber-bottom dumpsters. I don't know. The other thing I'm concerned about is the property values. These other people are going to make some nice money from selling these properties, but in turn, they're going to make my property go down in value. I don't know if that's too fair. That's all I have.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Chairman Lamb, members of the commission, I'm Laws Bolden, 358 DeJarnett Lane. I've had some experience in commercial real estate over the years, and this truly is, I'm in favor, it truly is an opportunity. You rarely see a group of property owners congeal themselves and present an opportunity. So there's been some discussion, is it an opportunity or is it not? It is. I've 27 years, I can tell you I've never seen it before. 358, where I live, would be underwater if Huddleston Steel hadn't engineered the way through Bradford Place. I have the utmost confidence in Bill and his staff. And my experience in the city of Murfreesboro is certainly that once something is zoned commercial highway, that's not the end of the input. I don't know why we have that ongoing discussion. I've had input from all kinds of people in projects way down the line, even though it was zoned. So it's not the end of the citizen input as I know it. I have the utmost faith in Joseph and his staff and Bill and the others in the process. So they fixed my problem on the other side of Memorial, and I think they can fix this too. And y'all have multiple opportunities to review all kinds of plans, all kinds of tenants, drawings, so forth and so on. That being said, there was another issue that I did want to touch upon. Why commercial highway versus PUD? I mean, multiple property owner PUDs have been a disaster, the ones that I've come across, from Georgia to Kentucky. And so I'm not convinced that PUDs are the right route, particularly when you have checks and balances in place like the city of Murfreesboro does with Joseph and his staff. So I am in favor and want to see it drained and want to see it brought to its highest and best use. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bowley. Anybody else?
Hi, good evening. I want to thank you for having this meeting. A lot of times we find out at the last minute on public meetings, just if we're busy in our daily lives and don't get a chance to come. So I'm really glad to see so many people here. My name is Cynthia Allen. I'm at 206 Peacock Avenue. We're on the other end. The main reason I'm here tonight is we're with some development that's already occurred behind Adams Place, and I've got a couple questions as you're thinking about the development and the drainage issues. I know change is inevitable, but sometimes we make change and we're left with the results, and sometimes those are fabulous, especially in the city. We have some fabulous change occurring, but we also have some problems, even with good intentions. Our Adams Place, I've got some questions on what kind of detention and retention ponds they're wanting to put in. The Adams Place pushes water out into our neighborhood. We're right behind there, and we've looked at that, I think, with the city, and I think they've really been trying to address some of those. But I know from our neighborhood, I don't think they're addressed, well. We have a lot of standing water still. It pools back there. It doesn't drain always. Although it goes down fast, we do have some stagnant water. The other question I have, I think it matters the size of these developments that we do. I know some stormwater regulations are going to change in the future, but the sizes of your development, when we're talking about commercial highway versus PUD, that makes a big impact on how much water is going to drain off. And I know we've got Walmart coming in on our neighborhood, but those big developments are going to impact. And we've heard tonight that water drainage is a huge issue. I think we brought up the sinkhole. I'd like to see some of the studies that were done and see if the public can look at some of that and be confident about are sinkholes going to be an issue with them widening or draining to them. I also think the airport, we haven't really brought that up. The airport retention pond or detention pond, I'm not sure which it is. It holds water. It holds a lot of water. Those businesses that are behind there, a lot of those people don't want to speak out because they don't live here, but they have a lot of drainage issues. And even though that's an easement and people are having these easements, I don't think they fully understand how much water is going to be on that easement property. And you don't really know until it's already there. And sometimes that's too late. I know some of the property owners in our neighborhood didn't realize how much volume of water was going to sit back there. And I think they brought up the safety too, but many of these easements, I know the one behind our house is about this deep, or behind in our neighborhood, and there's children right there. There's no fence or anything. And so when that water comes through, you have no idea if it's going to be shin deep or if you're going to step off in there. And there's also, in our area, there's a lot of trees. I think there's a 55-gallon drum back there that would be great to be removed. But there's trash and debris and stuff that floods back in there. And who is cleaning that out? And is that getting into our sinkholes? Is that getting into our ditches and clogging stuff up? So there's a lot of these other things that come besides the water that I don't think we've brought up tonight. I'm opposed, if you haven't already figured that out, not necessarily to development, but the kind of development. With 840 coming through, it seems like we could do some smaller commercial development, office space and all that. That was my big issue. So thank you guys very much.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Anybody else?
Good evening. My name is Angie Jennings. My address is 2506 Morgan Road, and if you can look at the map there, we're one of the affected properties. We've been sitting here for about 2 hours, and I know a lot of people, this is way past their bedtimes as well, but it's also a very contentious subject, and I think you can see that both sides are very passionate about what they want for this property. One thing I think we can all agree on is that we want what is best for everyone, what is best for the community. We've asked a lot of questions tonight, and we've gotten some answers. There are some answers we have not received, some very important answers. And there is some talk of urgency of getting this zoned immediately. And I think that Mr. Murphy and his group have been very thoughtful and provide a lot of consideration with their plan. But I also think that there is more thought and more consideration that need to be put into this plan so that we have a more detailed idea as neighbors what we're going to be looking at every day when we get up in the morning. With that being said, I respectfully request that you table this discussion until we can get more answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jennings. Would anybody else like to speak?
Ms. Jennings, if you listen, you're about to get answers.
My name is Debbie Cali. My husband and I live at 306 Bluebell Avenue. Bluebell is in the Palmer Heights subdivision. We have lived there since 1987. Currently, we are definitely opposed to this rezoning without a planned development. I, as an art teacher, always taught my kids that before you paint a picture, you plan it, and you plan it well. And that's how I feel, that we have an idea, but no plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Anybody else? Last call. Unless I'm missing somebody coming forward, I'm going to close the public hearing. Mr. Adlott, I'm going to turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Lamb, members of the Planning Commission. First of all, I want to answer some questions that I did hear. I heard several questions, and I will try to answer them. And you all might want to maybe clarify as I go along, if you do. One of the first questions I heard was from Mr. Robinson asking, is there a project that is going on? And then if the zone is approved, will the team stick together afterwards? To my knowledge, there is not a project in terms of a development. I don't know of any shopping center. I don't know of any office development. I don't know of anybody that's ready to come in and submit a plan to me. Nobody has talked to me about a specific plan. I have talked with the applicants, primarily Ms. Lassiter, some of her family, and the agents that she has hired. That's been the ones I've talked to primarily. Nobody has brought development. I will say that several years ago we did entertain a plan for a Publix. It did get to the zoning stage. At that time we did deny that plan. That would have been back in around 2005. It was as a planned development. It was denied in large part because there was a fundamental problem with the engineering, in my belief. The comment from the engineer that said, well, we just drain and let the water percolate into the sand showed me that they did not have a very good knowledge of what Murfreesboro and Rutherford County were made of. And at that point, they wanted an answer that night, and they got one because they wanted a thumbs up, thumbs down, and they had a bad plan. Since that time, one of the things we have invested in has been planning in terms of drainage. Some of you attended a meeting at one of our schools back in 2010, just after the big flood that we had. And it was for the purposes of gaining public input, gaining information about the drainage in North Murfreesboro, because Murfreesboro wanted to, the Murfreesboro staff, the Murfreesboro City Council, wanted to invest in the study of this area to begin to get an idea. That was in some regards a follow-up of the testimonies we had at the public hearing for the Publix. It was denied that there was a drainage problem in this area, that the people along Archer, Morgan Road, Palmer Heights, and Regency Park, that there was a known drainage problem and we need to do something about it. So we broadened the scope We hired an engineer, and it was independent of this property. It was for a bigger area. We have been pursuing it. We went to the first phase of scoping. We got public input. Some of you attended the meeting, and some of you brought some very good information to us. Fortunately, we'd had a real big rain, so we'd had some really good information to go out and observe ourselves. After that, we went into the next phase where we began to isolate the basins, where we began to pinpoint where the problems were, where the deficiencies were, to look what could be done. And that's not just in this basin. It's really the north side of Murfreesboro, north of Haynes and DeJarnett, all the way up to Compton Road and Thompson Lane. It includes a big area. But one of the areas we found, and it is this sub-basin where this property is, that in order to solve some of the chronic drainage problems was some more active approach would be needed rather than just a management plan. The active approach has been to take it to the next step, and that is to identify what a construction project would be. And that's not unheard of for the city to invest in a construction project. We did it with the big ditch. We did it with the Bradford Place drainage, where we constructed the system, the infrastructure, the basic project, and then let others take it from there. One of the things about this area is we believe that if we put the infrastructure in, that the infrastructure would give immediate benefits to many of the property owners affected. I see Mr. Niebuhr in the audience, and I see him talking tonight, and his wife, and I've known them not long after I became plan director. I did have an opportunity to visit with Mr. Niebuhr. And if Mr. Niebuhr will think back, and I know he knows what I'm fixing to bring up, and that is, he talked to me before he bought his house. He's nodding yes. And I advised him then, don't buy there if you're worried about drainage, because there will be drainage in your backyard, sometimes for extended periods. And he's nodding again. He's on up to it because he remembers that, and he made a decision at that time. And I'm not saying that it's his fault, because it's not his fault in the sense that the drainage was coming, and there's no way he could have envisioned the magnitude of what it was. Even though I'd even showed him photographs, I believe. But the thing is, it's a naturally occurring phenomena in that Hooper Bottom. Some things we can fix. Some things we can't. Some things we can manage. Some things we can change. Some things we just have to manage. Hooper's Bottom is something we manage. We devised a management plan for Hooper's Bottom, and although there is a lot of drainage in his backyard, I don't think it gets into his floors, or it may get under his house, but it doesn't get into his floors. He made a choice to go with the management plan and have faith in it. What we feel here is the city may need to have an active involvement in seeing some constructed, a drain system. And at the same time, we don't want to turn it loose and harm Mr. Niebuhr and his wife and his family and his neighbor, Ms. Wilson. So we're in the process of that. And before anything's built, we probably will have a public vetting of it. We will probably have another neighborhood meeting. I don't see why we wouldn't. We want to have public input. We want there to be support for that kind of project. So Mr. Niebuhr and your neighbors, bear with us. We'll have something. And that's going to go on independent of this application tonight. So that was the first question, and it went a little bit further than I'd really expected, but I wanted to get that on the table. Now, the next question Mr. Robinson had, will they stick together? I don't know. I don't know. They've made their application together. They have a similar need, and their need is bound by a need to address a drainage issue and a need to address traffic. Not any one of those property owners in the original area that was colored orange on the map can fix that drainage problem by themselves, or even with the city's help. They're going to have some common working together to see it taken to fix the problem for them to develop. We may be able to get some immediate relief, but they won't be able to develop the property without some banding together and sticking together. Mr. Robinson also asked about these about the downstream issues of flooding, and will it improve the situation for others? Part of what we want to do with this drainage plan is improve the entire system. We don't want to take water from one area where there is an equilibrium, where everybody's learned to live with it, and turn it loose as a demon on somebody else's neighborhood. So I will tell Mr. Robinson and the people in this audience that we're not going to just turn that water loose to cause a problem for somebody else. Fix it here and cause a problem over here. I'd rather just keep it here and not cause a problem for somebody new. So we will have we will expect to have some public vetting of our plan, and two, we're not going to turn it loose on somebody else to cause them a problem. About the widening of Haynes Drive, I'm going to defer to our city engineer about the plan, but I think that at this point, the plan that we're envisioning would be taking Haynes Drive to where it has curbs and gutters somewhere near Sinking Creek. So we won't be taking it all the way through and widening it. I think we're looking at a 3-lane roadway. It'd probably have curbs and gutters. It would have sidewalks. Now, one of the reasons we're looking at that, it's not just all about the sheer number of cars on the road. The road is inadequate. The road does not have the adequacies of an urban street, and it's being called upon to be an urban street, and it is an old country road. It's been beefed up a little bit. We've improved the turns at Sulphur Springs Road and Haynes Drive, but that road is inadequate for what it's being called upon to do in this community. The road needs to be improved. It is the city's responsibility to address that. We're going to be evaluating it during our major thoroughfare plan process. It will help establish the priority we're going to place on rebuilding that road. But the road needs to be rebuilt because it has roadway inadequacies. When we have the volumes of traffic that we're hearing the testimony tonight that it has, and that we all observe ourselves, that we get calls about, it doesn't take long for us to know that that road needs to be rebuilt. And I do hate the idea of having to lose trees, but that may be a consequence of some of the roadway improvements there. I don't think it's going to require a dramatic amount of right-of-way, but that's part of building roads. And we'll have to know more about it. Again, I expect there'll be a public meeting before we go into any kind of a design on that. And that is the way we do roads in our community. I was trying to make some stars. Mr. Webb, excuse me, I don't think he actually asked a question, but I do know Ms. Quinn did. And Ms. Quinn asked, why was the OG not considered as a classification? And the sort of follow-up with that was about, well, she's gotten conflicting testimony from an applicant in another application says it's not good to have commercial at an intersection, and here we're saying they want commercial at an intersection. Ms. Quinn, I don't remember Mr. Ayers saying that. I suspect that you're getting something out of context, because I know the problem with their property was they had wanted to change the zoning for apartments, and it was zoned commercial highway. It was at an intersection, and they felt that property had been marketed. It had the wrong dimensions for commercial at that location. It wasn't going to fit their needs, but they were wanting to do a multifamily project. And I'm not responsible for what Mr. Ayers may have told you. I don't recall he said that, but I don't know what all he might have said. In fact, I don't think I may have been at that meeting. I wasn't at that meeting. But about the OG, there may be other classifications that could be used. That's not beyond the realm of possibility. Commercial highway allows there to be some ability to adjust without another public hearing if the Planning Commission wants to recommend something different. For instance, the city has a commercial fringe classification that is several degrees more sensitive to a residential area that immediately adjoins it. It could divide the area into a couple of different zones. Some of it could be zoned office general. One of the things I will point out, and I do believe it's true, the office general district has not worked out in this area. The Haynes property near your home part of it was zoned office general for the better part of 20 years, and it was marketed for that for a long time, and it never moved. We see office general land in the Gateway area, and it's not moving either. It's stagnated, and I expect that we're going to be addressing a zoning application for it. The OG was really conceived as more of a small area zone rather than a large tract zone. So other classifications can be considered. This is what the application is for. The Plan Commission will ultimately be responsible for deliberating for this. And I will add something else. We've heard some requests to why can't we just defer action tonight? That may actually be an appropriate thing to do. I would think that before the Plan Commission took action, the action it takes should be done in a televised meeting, because the next opportunity may not be a public hearing, but rather than do it in a work session that may not be televised, I think you all would like to be able to see the decision made. So I think that I would recommend to the Plan Commission that if we did defer it, that we would pick it back up maybe in a month and do it live on TV like we're doing it tonight. Ms. Allen asked about the what kind of detention and retention. And the situation over there behind Peacock Avenue is a little bit different than what we're going to see here. I would say it's quite a bit different. The management plan behind Peacock does call for water to stand in those sinkholes. Those are very large depressions. If I remember correctly, in the order of 10 to 15 acres in size. I'm not sure where Ms. Allen is. There she is in the back. And they were originally, the management plan that we adopted there was for there to be water in those. But the floor elevations for everybody around them was going to be above it. The ultimate overflow would be down Independence Way. So if we're talking about the same sinkholes, that's the management plan. And I would invite you to come to our office if you haven't already to meet with one of our engineering staff. Mr. Huddleston has spent a lot of time studying that plan, and I think he's probably the most knowledgeable of the staff to be able to explain it and show you. Find your property on the city's maps and explain how you fit into that program. Those are the main questions that I heard. I heard a lot of statements, but those were the questions that I marked as questions tonight. I want to add something else now while I've still got the podium and speaking. I want to talk a little bit about how the application came to be and why such a large area for the public. Ms. Laster began to visit with me as a planner, I guess, the better part of 10 years ago, maybe 8 years ago, right after the public's application was denied. And then I was telling her, Ms. Laster, we've got a couple of big problems with the ability to see your property develop. One of them is, just by yourself, it doesn't make any sense for you to proceed with an application. You're really going to need to get a larger area. We need to really look at a larger area. Also, we're going to have to get an idea of how we're going to address this drainage. We don't today have the idea. That was back in 2006. Haynes Drive, at that point, we were looking at Haynes Drive as moving forward as construction. Well, she visited with me several times. Her father was still alive at that point. She was interested in doing something, but she really wasn't able. Then, just before her father passed, she paid some visits and said she's really serious about moving forward. And I suggested, well, you need to talk with your neighbors. I think you need to get some help. I think you need to study these issues of drainage. I think you need to study these issues of traffic. I think you need to do some planning. Now, bear in mind, all the things that you see, that's not the sum total of the plan that they've done. Part of what they've done is to evaluate potential locations for signals, which they've done, which is really very helpful. And the ability to lock them down, do they make sense? Are they approvable by TDOT? Will TDOT approve them if the right conditions are met? Yes, that's what we see. Can the city approve them? Yes, if the right conditions are met. The drainage, we've begun to get the handle on the drainage. So she did recruit other property owners. We did have a neighborhood meeting. We had a lot of you out there at the meeting. I think it was a good discussion at that night. The Planning Commission wanted to add these additional areas. They're colored in blue on the map that we looked at, the additional 30 acres or so, because the view is, even if we don't change the zoning now, we really need to discuss them, because just as sure as we rezone the area that the application is made for, if that happens, this next area is going to come soon behind it. So it's best to at least study it, even if we don't take any action on it, even if we recommend something different, even if we recommend to do nothing. At least we can have done our job. And I want to tell you, the Plan Commission's job is to study these. Yes, it is part of the study effort. It is to get public input. But ultimately, it makes a recommendation to the City Council. And when it goes before the City Council, they don't want to be in the situation of having said, well, we didn't consider that. So, yes, they did consider that, and that's why that area was included. I'll be glad to answer Plan Commission's questions.
There was a question, I think, or a reference to the stub streets, even though that has not been included in any plan. It's a site plan approval process, but I haven't heard anything about anybody requesting opening of any stub streets.
There is one street that stubs into this just south of Bluebell Avenue along Archer. It is into the back of, Mr. Rogers' property. I won't say never, ever, 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 because I don't know what the future holds. But what I can say is we don't want to create a situation that causes a traffic problem. If the connection is made, we want it to be made right. I will tell you this: if this property were redeveloped as residential, I would almost demand the connection. If it's commercial, I want it to be downplayed because I don't want it to be I don't think it's the right place to introduce commercial traffic into that subdivision. So that's my feeling is I can't give an answer today because I'm not looking at a plan to evaluate and make a recommendation. I don't know what the rest of the staff is going to say in that regard, but I can tell you it has the wrong feel to it for what I would be looking for a connection into that subdivision. Also, I think some of the stubs to the north, some of the connections to the east makes Palmer Heights a pretty well connected subdivision. It's not for lack of connections today.
Any comments or questions from members of the Planning Commission?
One of the dilemmas we have is Haynes Drive. I guess I should tell people that I moved in Palmer Heights in 1978. So if that's a conflict, Mr. Eyes, I guess I'm just going to have to live with it. And I just recently sold my house in Palmer Heights to my son. So that house has been in the family since 1978. And I know most of the neighbors very well that back up on Archer. And Pat, I've known him when we lived on Elliott together about 40 years ago. So I do understand that, but Haynes Drive is a problem because I got people that tell me that we really need to fix Haynes Drive bad. And then I got people that wear me out over, let's don't fix that. It's going to create more problems. So I need some help on Haynes Drive. So if you want to call me, write me, or mail me, or come see me, please do on Haynes Drive. All right, one of the other things, these are statements. They're not value judgments. These are statements. Someone said that there's really no planning process going on in this. Well, tonight is a planning process. And the night a couple of weeks ago when we had a public meeting was a planning process. And I understand there was a meeting at Sportscom the other night. There was a planning process, but it was a neighborhood planning process. So we are in a planning process. They said there's no plan for traffic, but we've already cited the traffic lights on Memorial Boulevard. So that's a planning process. Now, granted, I can't tell you what development is going to go in there eventually. But there is huge amounts of input from this body, the city council, and the neighbors on site plan review. And site plan review is when somebody brings a plan to us and lays it on the table, and our experts, our planning staff, and our engineers pick it apart. They turn it upside down and inside out and pick it apart. So that is an ongoing process. So to say that once this is zoned, it's over is just not true. So with that, that's my statement.
I think Mr. Davis didn't like the process, and I can certainly understand what he was talking about there. But, you know, the purpose of our public hearing tonight on this is to make a recommendation to the city council. We have an excellent city council made up of people from diverse backgrounds that thoroughly discuss every item that comes before them in business for the city and do a wonderful job on trying to direct the city in the correct directions that's best for the people in general. We're going to make a recommendation to the city council one way or the other on this project. Either we're going to recommend approval or we're going to recommend disapproval. Either way, the city council will have an opportunity to review it again If the developer wanted to go ahead and the applicants wanted to go ahead and take it to council, even with a negative recommendation from us, they have the right to do so. And the city council would then hold another public hearing about it. Now, Mr. Davis talked about the process and didn't like it. City of Murfreesboro goes on pretty hard as far as more than satisfying the requirements set by the state of Tennessee for our processes. We're not, to my knowledge, we're not required at the Planning Commission level to hold a public hearing on annexations and rezoning requests, but we do because we want the public to have as much input as possible before we pass it on to the City Council. At that time, the City Council will deliberate about it again. But our process, in my opinion, does work and works extremely well. But the city is always changing their codes to try to make it better and make the process much more fair for everybody. So if that's what the City Council deemed to do, to change our codes, they need to look at it and do so. But that's what they're elected by us to do. This project, I cannot see it going anywhere without some type of answer to the drainage. We've got to have assurances that this drainage situation is going to be addressed appropriately long-term. I first moved out on Lebanon Road, now Memorial Boulevard, in 1960, and it's had a drainage problem ever since I've been out there. I mean, I don't remember where it ever didn't have a drainage problem. And ever since Lebanon Road was put in by the state, it's had drainage problems over there. So, you know, it needs to be taken care of, and whether that's through public resources with storm management money, private funds, or a combination of the two, that's to be decided. But it needs to be addressed. But it can't be addressed in a way that it damages the neighbors of Palmer Heights or any other subdivision downstream. So it's going to have to be looked at very, very closely. Tonight we've had an opportunity to open the discussion pertaining to the drainage, traffic, and all the items that are pertaining in this request tonight. Another thing, we don't come up with these proposals as far as bringing items in like this for zoning changes. The applicants got together and did that. They came in with a request for commercial highway. That's not something that the Planning Commission came in and said, hey, why don't you put commercial highway there? That's something we think we need to do. They came in with it. It's just like if you owned a piece of property somewhere else in Murfreesboro and you wanted the zoning rechanged. You changed something. You have the right to make that application. And the application would end up going through the staff and coming before this body and the City Council just like this will. So it's our somewhat unenvious job to have to make these difficult decisions, but that's why they pay us the big bucks, I guess. So I think a deferment on this would be in order myself. I agree with Mr. Adelot wholeheartedly. We need to look at it closely. We need to give more time for the staff and the engineering group to get together. The public, your input to the planning department does not stop at this meeting. They are here 5 days a week for your input on any items that's coming before us. So please feel free to contact the staff and sit down with them for any questions, concerns. If we have not adequately answered your questions tonight, I'm sure they will take time to meet with you and try to answer your questions for you. Any other comments?
Chairman Lamb, I tend to agree with you about this is probably something that we need to take a little more time to look at. And as Joseph, as you said, I think it does need to be at one of the televised meetings, not at one of our day meetings so that everyone can see. But over the course of the last few weeks, I think I've only gotten about 2 emails and 2 phone calls about this. And then we've had 2.5 hours worth of comment from the public tonight. And I think if we're going to invite the public to come and speak to us either for or against a project, then we need to take the time to digest every bit of that and compare that with what the applicants have presented to us to see where we go.
Mr. Lamb, and excuse me, Mr. Halbert, for interrupting, but if we defer, one of the things I'd like to do is to have some more discussion from the city engineer and the engineering staff about the drainage issues, because I think that's one of the big issues, and to drill into that a little bit more at the in a way that is a little bit less of a public hearing setting, where it's a little bit more of a learning setting.
Ken, I know that you had something to say as well, but a couple of things I also would like to be looked at while we're considering this is the properties, that little piece of the orange, Joseph, that does jut out, that goes into some of those more shallow properties. If the applicant could talk to those owners that expressed their interest tonight and perhaps what could be done from a buffering standpoint for those more shallow lots, that can be done. And then also the issue that was raised about paying for how the drainage is going to be addressed. I think that's something that we need to know ahead of time if we're going to embark on a project like this that is going to help the neighbors, but at the same time, if one of the benefits of it being a large tract being put together is that private industry being able to pay for that, I think we need to have at least some aspect of that plan in place as to how that payment mechanism would come about.
Any other comments, Mr. Halliburton?
Well, Toby's last comment was going to be my question, so I won't go any further with that. My only question is, I guess, and we can address this as you mentioned in our next meeting, but it sounds like Mr. Huddleston is pretty far along with respects to his solution, and I don't know if it could happen by this next meeting for us to actually see and understand what that solution is, or is that months down the road in reference to the drainage?
I believe that we can give enough information that you'll have a good understanding. Part of the engineering of the final design of something would not be there, because that would require surveying on people's properties.
I see.
Actually going out, but in terms of the big picture planning solution, I think that's very achievable. If not at our May 15th meeting, certainly by June 3rd, whatever the first meeting is in June.
Thank you.
And so you are saying that we can spend some more time studying this at our mid-month meeting, but just not have any final deliberation and vote until the next televised meeting? Because I do think we need the work session meeting to really dig into the drainage plan and all of that. So is that a possibility?
Yes, ma'am. And something else I'm going to advise the Plan Commission on. Right now, I think we're going to have a relatively light load of business for our first meeting in June, judging from the applications we received on Monday for our next cycle. So we'll probably have some Plan Commission capacity at our next 1 month from now.
Any other comments? The Daily News Journal this morning weighed in their editorial section on this subject, brought up several good points, but they closed their editorial comments with the paragraph, and I wanted to read it. Change is imminent, but with proper planning and public works efforts, matters such as drainage, traffic, and visual clutter can be controlled. And I think that's a pretty profound paragraph right there. It's going to take a lot of study and action by the city to make sure that this is done in a correct way, if it's done at all. So I just wanted to assure all of you that we're going to do everything we can, and I'm sure the City Council will as well. If this project is moved further, it will be done in a way that will be done right and first class. If there's no other comments or questions, we're ready for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I recommend deferral.
Second. Motion is made to defer. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed. Motion carries. I'm going to declare about a 5-minute recess. We will start back up at 9:37. Okay, I'll call the meeting to order again. Move on to the fourth public hearing of the evening, that being the zoning application of approximately 2.92 acres to be rezoned from commercial fringe to commercial highway, approximately 20.98 acres to be rezoned from RS-15 to commercial highway, approximately 14.8 acres to be rezoned from residential RS-15 to commercial highway, and approximately 12 acres to be rezoned from RS-15 to residential zero lot lines, and approximately 50.9 acres in 2 tracts to be rezoned from RS-15 to RM-16 along Veterans Parkway and Franklin Road, Highway 96. Swanson Developments, LP is the applicant. Ms. Ely.
Thank you, sir. Our next public hearing is to consider changing the zone of properties located along the south side of Highway 96 with Franklin Road and located east of Veterans Parkway. This is the same land or tract of land from which the city is in the process of purchasing and constructing a school for a new Murfreesboro City School. The Planning Commission did review and approve a site plan for that city school at our last meeting. The zoning application is for the balance of the tract and in part is for determining the location of a public street for which the applicant will be responsible for constructing associated with development of school campus. The zoning application is multi-part, as Chairman Lamb read, and you can see from the map that there are various colors on this map. The zoning application includes approximately 2.92 acres, which is the area colored yellow on the map, to be rezoned from its current commercial fringe district to CH district, and that's located at the intersection of Veterans Parkway and Franklin Road. The approximately 20.98 acres to the south and east are proposed to be rezoned from RS-15 to CH for a total tract of 24 acres to be zoned CH. That would be the area shaded pink and the area shaded yellow. The northeast corner, adjacent to Franklin Road, is located within the 100-year floodplain and floodway of Overall Creek. The applicant believes that this would be a good location for a possible neighborhood or community shopping center, similar to that constructed along New Las Casas Highway at North Rutherford Boulevard, adjacent to the Garrison Cove subdivision. The next part of the application includes approximately 14.8 acres to be rezoned from RS-15 to CL, located along Veterans Parkway and along the access street that the city will be constructing to access the school. Much of this land is rough and characterized by steep terrain, and I'll skip over to another map that you have located in your materials, and that map is a topographic map, and of course those lines represent various elevations, and you can see the closer the lines are, the steeper the elevation change, and you can see that there are some areas on this property that do have some rough terrain, and in Murfreesboro we would characterize it as a steep terrain. Some of this property that I was referring to be rezoned from RS-15 to CL is somewhat isolated from much of the remainder of the tract. The applicant believes that this location might be a good location for a light commercial and office type use that may possibly include dental offices, pediatric offices, daycare centers, or family medical centers and such. The next part of the request are for 2 tracts to be zoned RM-16, and those are the 2 tracts that are shaded orange on the map. These 2 tracts, the northern tract, the northern orange area, consists of 30.2 acres and lies north of the school site adjacent to Overall Creek, and therefore is affected by the 100-year floodplain and floodway of Overall Creek. Otherwise, the land seems to have some qualities that might be suitable for a multifamily campus. And I'll, for a moment, just flip over to our floodway map, which was also included in your materials, and you can see the areas for which the Overall Creek is located. The floodway would be the area shaded pink. The floodplain are the blue speckled areas, with the 100-year floodplain being the darker blue speckled area. And so you can see that it affects several areas of this property. Go back to the zoning. The second tract of land, which is the southernmost area that's shaded orange, consists of approximately 20.7 acres and are located on that steep hill on the property. Again, you can see that that's what you can see from the topo map. This portion of the tract is significantly affected by the steep terrain of the site, and any development on this tract will be challenged due to that terrain. The application also includes 12 acres to be rezoned to RZ, which is Zero Lot Line Residential District. This tract is located between the two RM16 tracts along the street that the applicants propose to construct between the school site and Veterans Parkway, and that is the area shaded blue in the center of the property. Subject property, the overall subject property, the entire area, is located within the Blackman land use area and plan. The plan, which there is a black and white excerpt that you have before you, the plan depicts the property to be used for commercial purposes along Franklin Road and at the intersection with Veterans Parkway. The plan depicts the property to be used for high-density residential purposes on the eastern portion of the property where the proposed school is to be located, and for medium-density residential on the western part of the tract. In terms of density and a mixture of land uses, the zoning application is generally consistent with the Blackman land use plan. Mr. Joe Swanson's here this evening, and do you have a presentation? Or Mr. Kevin Gunther is his representative, and I believe they'll come up and like to present this request to you, after which you should conduct a public hearing prior to making any recommendation to City Council. Staff, of course, is available to answer questions you might have.
Any questions of staff before we open the public hearing? Mr. Gunther, you have a presentation?
Yes, sir. Chairman Lamb, Planning Commission members, we will keep it brief. We appreciate the opportunity to bring this rezoning request before you. And I want to highlight four things briefly in addition to staff's comments. We do appreciate their review of the project, and have appreciated the opportunity to work with them on their observations and their information. The first is, as Ms. Ely had mentioned, we are in keeping with the Blackman vision, and especially the commercial node at that intersection of Highway 96 and Veterans Parkway, and also with the higher density residential that we're proposing, both medium and high density residential. The second thing is, we feel that this application is in good keeping with infrastructure that surrounds the site. You've got Veterans Parkway, you've got Highway 96, and we've got existing infrastructure as far as water and sanitary that's coming out here. We are proposing this is in good keeping with infrastructure that the city has invested in the project, or I should say surrounding the project. We want to see that investment be put to good use. The third thing is, we feel this is a timely request, especially in light of the school. And if you'll see, there's a road network coming in place with that school. This is an opportunity for the zoning to tie into that network and to use that to good advantage, and to think about the surrounding land uses that are occurring in addition to school development. And the last thing that I will highlight is the high density residential is something that can work well on these slopes. It can work well in conjunction with Overall Creek. The reason for that is it gives us an opportunity to cluster things, to plan things, and really adjust the site and still get good benefit from the density that we're proposing, and at the same time acknowledge the environmental conditions that are out there. Mr. Joe Swanson is here. We'll both be here to answer any questions. Joe, would you like to add anything? Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you for your consideration of this project.
Mr. Swanson and the applicants for Regent Homes, I'm sorry to keep you here so late with putting you at the end of the agenda like this. At this time, I'll open the public hearing and ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak either for or against this proposal. Anybody at all?
Joe Swanson, 1188 Park Avenue. Thank you, Chairman Lamb, Commissioners, staff. As usual, this plan has gone through several revisions, working along with staff. We feel like it is, as I'm going to reiterate, in keeping with the Blackman land use study, and I would like to encourage you to make a favorable recommendation to City Council for approval. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Swanson.
I have a question.
Let me close the public hearing. Anybody else? Okay. I'll close the public hearing. Mr. Young.
Mr. Lamb or Ms. Ely, can you tell me when the Blackman plan was instituted, if that's the correct? The plan was planned?
In 2000.
I think we actually adopted it in 2000.
So that plan's 13 years old.
Mr. Jones wrote it, so.
That's right. Well, the point I'm making, the point I want to make is it's
Still in high school.
Well, I know. Graduated that year, wasn't it? Anyway, the point I want to make is it's amazing how 13 years ago we looked at a huge western tract of land and came up with something that we're pretty well close to, very close to now. So, we've heard a lot of discussion about no planning tonight. I think that's really good planning.
Mrs. Jones can take the credit.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. We need to thank her because she did write the plan.
Wonderful job. Any other questions or comments pertaining to this proposal? If not, we're ready for a motion.
If not, Chairman, I move we recommend approval.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. The final public hearing this evening is a PRD amendment application for approximately 44 acres along Sulphur Springs Road. Regent Homes, LLC is the applicant. Ms. Healy?
Thank you, sir. Our next public hearing is to consider changing the zone for property that's located between Sulphur Springs Road and North Thompson Lane. It is located along the eastern side of Sulphur Springs Road and west of North Thompson Lane. And the property has access to Sulphur Springs Road, and Satinwood Drive does dead end into the property. This property was approved as Oakley Springs PRD, Planned Residential District, by both the City Council, or Planning Commission and City Council in 2006. And soon after that, staff and Planning Commission reviewed preliminary plats, final plats, construction plans for this development that were submitted and, of course, approved. The development of the first phases moved forward, and substantial construction progressed on the remainder of the development. Activity in the subdivision was significantly affected by the economic recession, and the construction of the homes slowed for some period, of course, which we're all familiar with. The applicant, who is also the owner of the vacant lots and the developer of the property, is seeing an increase in development and opportunity to develop this and requests for new houses, and as such is ready to move forward with the construction of another phase of the development. This property is zoned PRD, which is Planned Residential District, and as such a specific program book was submitted to and approved by Planning Commission and City Council, and that becomes the zoning for this property. So if there's any change to that plan, the developer or property owner is required to go back through the legislative process, which is the zoning amendment process, to have that change approved by both Planning Commission and City Council. So the application before you is made by Regent Homes to amend that program book, and their request, I think, can be boiled down to two things. They'd like to change the phasing plan that was identified in the program book, and because this phasing plan was specifically outlined in that program book, they are required to amend the plan development to change that phasing plan. They want to increase the number of phases and also reduce the size of each phase, which would be consistent with plats that we have been reviewing in this past couple years, that the sections are smaller. And also, he would like to change the order of the phases, and by changing the order of some of the phases, that will cause the connection to Satinwood Drive to occur at an earlier phase than identified in the program book. The program book specifically said that Satinwood Drive would be connected in the last phase. Of course, when that was approved, it was, I believe, staff and City Council and Planning Commission's expectation that this subdivision would have been fully developed at this point. It was, of course, originally approved in 2006, and this being 2013. With the rate that development was happening when this was approved, we expected that at this point Satinwood Drive would have already been connected. So there has been a delay in that connection. So, of course, the years that have passed. The applicant is here as well as his representative, Mr. Matt Taylor. Mr. Taylor has prepared a short presentation regarding the requested change and would like to present that to you. After his presentation, you should conduct a public hearing prior to making any recommendations to City Council.
I think the key word in all of that was short.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
I just want to reiterate a couple of things. We did lay out our reasons for wanting to change the plan up in our letter to you. A couple of those are ease of construction. This whole site did have a lot of fill to bring in. There's still some to be brought in, but the area that we're wanting to develop next has the majority of it, if not all, in place. It's going to be easier to extend sewer to their place. And then we want to make this connection to Satinwood. Not only do we think it'll be good for interconnectivity through city services, we also think it'll be good for the development as a whole. It was planned originally. It is going to happen, and we are, according to our original proposed schedule, it would have happened 4 years ago. So we do appreciate your consideration, and myself as well as the owners and applicants are here for any questions that you may have.
I have a question before you leave the podium. One of the things we discussed, and specifically during the work session, was the management of the construction traffic. Would you elaborate on that maybe for the benefit of the Planning Commission and those in the audience?
Yes. The applicants are not only the developers of the property, they're also the only home builder in the development, and they intend for it to stay that way. So they have not only leverage to keep infrastructure traffic, such as your large dump trucks, your paving machines, pipe suppliers, to stay off of Satinwood, but they are also committed to keeping the subcontractors for the individual homes themselves off of Satinwood. All that would come off of Sulphur Springs. Their only intention for Satinwood is for the residents and potential buyers of their development, as well as the ability of city services and the residents of the existing Prim Springs to utilize that to access Sulphur Springs if need be.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Any other questions?
Mr. Aylott, for the rolling stock for the city coming through there, garbage trucks and leaf trucks and all that, that's going to actually cut a lot of going around that whole area down. Is that?
Yes, it would. I did speak with our sanitation, our solid waste director, Mr. Smith. He told me this would be very beneficial to his routes. It would improve his ability to provide his service without having to get out on Thompson Lane, and would reduce his trips. So he feels a very good connection that he would benefit from. And as always, the fire department said anytime you can interconnect and give us another way through, they like it, they want it, and they would also urge to see this connection made.
Okay. If I understand correctly, in 2006, the residents of the Prim Springs area were made aware that this was going to happen. And we thought it would happen within 3 to 4 years, but it's going to take it 7 to 8 years. Is that?
That's the way I read it. Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no other questions, I'll open the public hearing and ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak.
Hello, my name is Michelle Ashley. I live in Prim Springs subdivision. I'm also the president of the HOA. We understand that the road's probably, there is no way of stopping the cut through, although none of us in the subdivision are in favor of that. We have road problems on Satinwood now. There's 3 or 4 paving problems that every time it rains, we end up with, sinking pavement that they've come and tried to repair, I'd say a half a dozen times at least over the last year and a half, maybe 2 years, which we continue to still have problems with every time it rains. We feel like the traffic coming through there is just going to add to that problem. We all bought in that subdivision to be able to have an area that we knew there was only one way in, one way out. We don't really feel like the benefit of the cut through with emergency vehicles is really going to benefit our subdivision, because there's now going to be the red light at the corner of Thompson and Sulphur Springs. Most of the emergency vehicles are probably on that side of the subdivision anyway, so they're going to cut up Sulphur Springs anyway. The original plan was to not cut that road through till at least 75% of the houses were constructed. There is 109 lots from my calculation of the Prim Spring estates, and right now there's only 22 homes that are up, and that's not even being lived in. That's started empty homes or, people currently living there. So there's still several years, I feel like, of construction of that subdivision that we want to at least delay this cut through. permanently, which is probably not going to happen, but at least as long as we can. We just don't see the benefit, that it's going to give our subdivision at all, and the excess traffic and backup, and you're not going to be able to stop people coming through there, vendors, and, you can ask them not to do that, but the likelihood is, that somebody, it's going to increase our traffic flow, and our roads are already bad, and there's been no solution to that problem, for several years that we still deal with heavy rain. So we're asking for you all not to do that at the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lashley. Anybody else?
My name's Kurt Simmons. I live in the newer Prim Springs development at 3221 Chino, and I'm supportive of this. We moved in. We were one of the earliest buyers in the subdivision. We moved in the spring of 2010. And I think it aids us in getting back and forth to Siegel High School, and I think it aids people that live in Prim Springs in getting over to 840. It's a positive development. It would have happened a long time ago, save that the recession slowed down development. So I'm supportive of the process and supportive of you guys supporting that change.
Thank you, Mr. Simmons. Anybody else?
Good evening, Chairman Lamb, members of the Commission. The hour's late. Thank you for being here. My name is Libby Green. I live at 1719 Satinwood Drive. I am speaking in opposition to the extension of Satinwood at this time. I have several reasons. As far as one entrance, one exit to a subdivision, that has always actually been very reassuring to me and my family, because we know every car that goes in and out of that subdivision. There is no through traffic. When we anticipate what will happen if that extension is made at this point, we're going to become a connector. Satinwood Drive is a straight shot, and it has the potential of being a racetrack. We have a lot of children in the neighborhood. Their safety has to be considered. As far as emergency vehicles coming in and out, I feel just as secure as can be that there doesn't have to be a connection all the way through. One of my main problems is I feel that this is going to change the community of Prim Springs, because we're known as being sort of a little cul-de-sac area. I think that that's going to change if this is opened up. Michelle did speak to the paving problems. This has been over and over. We have had to have the city come out and do this. Last year it got so bad that you had to drive on the wrong side of the road where the street was caving in. And there are 3 patches on Satinwood Drive and 1 on another street. If you add their traffic and very likely Oakley's traffic, which would probably use us as a cut through too, I'm afraid the city's looking at a lot of re-engineering. And I did speak with the city several times, and at one point I was told that most likely the problem was enough rock wasn't put in when those utilities were installed under the street and in the road bed. So this is going to be an ongoing problem. I would encourage you to come out and see what we're talking about, because the last Band-Aid is already beginning to give way again. And finally, a couple of things that were in the statement from the developer of Prim Springs Estates. This says, the indirect way to enter the development is discouraging to some potential buyers and frustrating to existing residents. Extending this could turn a struggling development into a bright spot in the community by completing another quality and highly sought-after development in this area. With all due respect, it appears to me that the developer of Prim Springs Estates is seeking to enhance his property, his marketability, at the expense of those of us who are existing homeowners in Prim Springs. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Anybody else?
My name is Glenn Cummings. I live at 1706 Satinwood Drive. This developer, he says that he's going to police the construction traffic. I've been around construction all my life, and there ain't no such thing. These people are going to go the closest way they can go. And as someone's already referred, this Satinwood is a very straight street, and we have enough trouble trying to keep the folks that live there at a decent speed. And when you make it a cut-through street, it's just not going to happen. And you're going to take away the safety. And as far as the recession, we had nothing to do with the recession. We, the City Council of Murfreesboro, agreed after we begged and got on our knees and pleaded and begged and prayed that they would not open that Satinwood Drive until there's 75% completion or somewhere in that neighborhood of homes in that estate. And I don't think that he has the right to come back and do this just because he's not getting money in his pocket as fast as he was wanting to. And one other thing, you can laugh at me, you can say I'm crazy, but I believe there's an underlying area in this thing where you don't want communities now. You must have 2 entrances to every subdivision, and I believe you take away the community spirit, and therefore you destroy the family. And if you think I'm lying, look at the TV station any night of the week and see what's happened when the family's destroyed. We have a responsibility to our children and to our grandchildren to uphold what we agreed to do. And just because this man is not getting the greenbacks in his pocket as fast as he wants to, that shouldn't be my responsibility or the people that live in Prim Springs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cummings. Anybody else?
I'm David McGowan. I'm president of Region Homes. I've sat through this last couple hours and heard a lot of discussions about planning. And one of the things that was discussed a lot was drainage. When we got the subdivision approved, one of the things was we had to address the drainage. And we actually spent almost $1 million constructing a 48-inch drain from this property all the way over to the river in order to correct the drainage problem that was in this area, which I think benefited Prim Springs. In addition to that, one of the things that was required is to lay out the subdivision in a way so it would not encourage through traffic. If you look at the layout of the subdivision, there's not a straight shot through Prim Springs Estates back over to Sulphur Springs Road. So just want to let you know that. I think that the planning process does work here in Murfreesboro. We do have a fine piece of property here. The homes are selling now well. We do think it will benefit the community to be able to have a connection back to the other community. And I think connecting this section will also improve the drainage problems that we know exist in their subdivision at this time. And there's actually a couple of residents that have contacted us directly and asked if they will actually pay to connect some pipes into the drainage structure that we plan to put in there. So just want to let you know that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McGowan. Anybody else?
Hi, I'm Mike Wheeler, 3052 Tanglefoot Cove. I was one of the original people that moved into the neighborhood. We were the 4th home built. And in 2000, and I believe it was 5 or 2006, we started having meetings because we knew about the new subdivision that was being put in. And one of the things that we had actually talked about was the fact that, yes, we understood that there was an intent to eventually connect Satinwood to that neighborhood. However, our biggest concern was the fact that there are, on my street alone, Tanglefoot, which is the one closest to the neighborhood, we intersect with Satinwood, there are 31 children on our street today, of which are in middle school and high school age. So from a safety standpoint on traffic, I mean, they're coming in, they're coming out. I mean, we know all of the children that are coming through the neighborhood. I'm not aware of any drainage problems that are going on in Prim Springs. If someone does have one, it's not been brought to any of our attention. But again, I think our biggest concern is that, yes, we are fully aware that this will eventually connect. We agreed to 75% up front, and we came to, I think it was this group as well, then to say that we were okay with the 75%. Right now, they're right at about 20%, and it's been 7 years. At the pace that they're running, all of these children will more than likely be in college by then, and you can connect all you want at that time. But absolutely, we as a community are very much against this. So thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Weaver.
My name is Sanjay Ghosh, and I live in 1707 Satinwood Drive. I'm totally in agreement with my previous speakers, whoever said, when I moved in this neighborhood, 2006, the primary consideration was the locality, obviously, and the neighborhood itself, and a single road which will be in and out for the neighborhood. I have 2 small children, and when I heard this news, I was really scared. The reason being that in that road, it's a straight road, and sometimes we find that people will just drive as fast as they could. And one more thing I wanted to tell you, that one of my friends, he was very much interested in that same locality to move in, and he visited recently to my home, and there are 2 homes are in sale next to mine. And when he heard that that connection will be taken away and there will be like another connection to the Prim Springs Strait, he immediately declined to see even those homes. So apart from that, I would say that it will definitely affect our property values, that's for sure. And to be very honest with you, I'm actually considering, because my daughter also is telling me the same thing, that we need to move out of this place now. So I just leave it up to you guys, but I completely oppose this. At least you should delay it.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Anybody else like to speak? Seeing nobody come forward, I'll close the public hearing. Mr. Adelot, do you have comments?
No, sir.
Okay. Questions and comments from members of the Planning Commission?
Mr. Adelot, when we approved this, going on 7 years ago now, the 75% mark, we knew that Satinwood was going to open up, but that was a compromise that we reached between the developer and Prim Springs at the time. Is that a fair way to characterize that scenario, or would you say it differently?
I'd say it's fair, and I would add that part of what we were looking at was we couldn't have done it with a standard subdivision because it just wouldn't have worked. But as a plan development, he was willing to make that as a commitment at the time.
Other than the change in the economy, has there been anything else that would merit justifying changing that compromise that was reached 7 years ago?
I guess one of the things that has changed has been an awareness of the maybe the city's fire and rescue staff, the city's planning staff, transportation staff, engineering staff, to be a little bit more supportive of making connections, a little bit more aggressive and supporting them when we see them. And as you'll notice, there's been a very true pattern that the planning staff have been very much up front on this issue, that we've vocalized our urging to make connections. Also, we've formalized a policy that we want to see the connections, and if we're going to see a stub street like Satinwood that doesn't go into a subdivision, that it be terminated properly with a cul-de-sac, because we don't want to see just stub streets, because those are impediments to service delivery. They are awkward to turn around in for our fire trucks. It causes backing and safety issues. So we have written into our subdivision regulations, which is post 2005, 2007, the need to see or properly terminate streets. So that's really what's maybe changed. It's been an evolution of our plan philosophy and our desire to see a better plan approach on these type of streets, to see them interconnected.
I guess on the one hand, I look at this, if we don't approve this, it's delaying the inevitable because the connection has always been part of the plan. But then I look back to when we approved this to start with, it was an intentional delay of the inevitable as a brokered compromise is what I struggle with.
I did too. When this came to me, I struggled with it a little bit because this was one of those things that I had to make a judgment call. Was this sufficient to warrant an amendment to the program book, or could it be done administratively? And after reviewing the record, I felt that I could not do it administratively. It did, in fact, warrant an amendment to the program book because there was such a degree of discussion on this subject that it had become a element of the plan that was more than casual. It was something very deliberate. It was something that I think to some large degree the applicant volunteered to do to help to gain approval of his plan, with the knowledge that his plan, that he felt was going to be a good quality plan, the development, but he didn't view it as something that was at that time critical, and to gain approval, and the connection was something the staff was pushing for because of the termination of the street, he would go along with it.
Okay.
Ms. Ely, would you put the map up on the plat up on the screen for the staff in the booth back there,
Sure.
please?
If we get there,
There you go. Now, we've heard some concerned neighbors about this becoming a large cut through. Boy, that's going to be a long, slow process cutting through there with all those curves, cul-de-sacs, curves, straights, and then into Satinwood. So I think maybe people might ride through there once and say it's not worth it.
But while we're talking about that, let's look at the other issue, not the other issue, but the other illustration. There were two that the staff did. One of them was a broader view. The reason I included it was because it shows the intersection of Sulphur Springs Road and a broader area of what may be what you might consider a traffic shed of what's going to collect traffic through there. And that's the illustration that right there. Part of what I was looking for was, would it be something that would capture traffic through from Oakley? And with the intersection improvements at Sulphur Springs Road and Thompson Lane that we're signalizing, I don't think that the Oakley traffic will choose to come through there. I just don't see it. I don't see that there's anything to be gained by doing it. Will this subdivision come through there? Absolutely. But going home and coming, the people who reside in this subdivision, I think they're going to do it. Will people cut off of Sulphur Springs Road to go through the subdivision to get to Thompson Lane? I doubt it. I think they'll stick with Sulphur Springs Road. And I wanted to bring this illustration so that you all can see the relative distance. One more thing, that Prim Lane, I think, just in case anybody's wondering, it does not extend through. It does not extend through. Prim Lane is a narrow street, and it does not extend through.
Mr. Daylight, another point was brought up about the disrepair of Satinwood Drive. That's almost a separate issue that the city manager will get a text in the morning on. I'm not going to text him.
The city engineer will be talking about it tomorrow, I expect. Mr. Huddleston's sitting here, and he's making notes on that very issue.
And another thing about speeding, and I learned this the hard way, but people that are speeding through the neighborhood are the neighbors that live there now, because there's no other way to get in or out. And the classic is the lady on Haynes Drive that called the city complaining about the speeders. So they sent the radar unit out there, and the first person they caught was her. So, they're legitimate concerns. Prim Springs is one of the finest neighborhoods in the city. There's very little turnover out there. The gentleman pointed out that there's 1 or 2 houses for sale occasionally out there. I don't see that this is going to deter anyone from moving into Primm Springs. What I have witnessed was a tornado blocking a road. Fire trucks can't go through the yards. There's houses burning in the back end, and you don't have a way in and way out, and you can't get through. That's a real health and safety issue. And I think sometimes people say, well, that won't happen, but if you looked at what happened in 10, it can happen. It happened to us. And earlier, many years ago, 15 years ago, probably 10, when the tornado hit the south side, it actually blew houses into the road that the emergency equipment couldn't get through. And I would hate to jeopardize the citizens of either subdivision by not making this connection. Granted, there were some compromises into the fact that it was going to, a percentage of houses was thrown in. But the other thing was that was estimated to be 4 years ago. So if certain things that had happened, this subdivision would have been pretty well completed, and that connection would have been made 3 years ago. So now it's into 7 years with the connection, and it'll probably be another year before it actually happens. So, you know, this is another tough call, but I think all the citizens would benefit both subdivisions by this happening. So I'll move to approval.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Young, before I entertain that promotion.
Yeah, we did.
Yes, we can. Okay. But before I entertain that motion, Mr. Adelot, you know, I'm still struggling with this agreement, the 75% agreement. And I certainly understand Mr. McGowan's problem here. Could we not, is there no middle ground on this where we could maybe have another consensus, maybe instead of 75% of the houses, maybe delay it until before that subdivision is complete?
Mr. Lamb, one of the things that I want to avoid happening would be for the street to be constructed and then there to be a barricade put across it. That's a public street on both sides and a barricade sitting there that blocks it. I think that'd be morally wrong.
Oh, sure.
I think it'd be legally wrong. And that's part of what plays in here. They're looking at the way that they have filled the land. When the subdivision was under development and they were working on the drainage function, they were able to obtain the fill material and they placed it in the low area, which is in the southern part of the property. The low area that they had drained, that he mentioned having constructed the expensive drainage relief. Well, once that was in place, they were able to fill that depression. They brought the material in. Well, that's where they would like to be able to move forward with their subdivision now, rather than to the north that doesn't have the fill in it that's in place. So it becomes a reallocating the phasing because of the grading they did when the opportunity presented itself. If they were to do that, I would want to keep the street away from that intersection. Then there are some other issues involving the utilities. There are electric lines. There are, I think there's some temporary electric lines. There are also some drainage pipes in the ground that also come into play in how the phasing would break down. I would have to, I'd rather defer action to take a finer look at that to see how that might affect him before I would offer a compromise tonight. And I think that I'd have to really confer with him to be able to do that.
Well, like I said, I'm struggling with this. The long-term good planning has the street open, and that's I think the commission would be unanimous about that. The long-term street needs to be open. The question is when, and the agreement between the developer and the residents of Primm Springs, I think, still comes into play, in my opinion. So I would personally be in favor of a deferral.
And I just want to bring up one more way to look at this, in that, if it were to open up sooner than later, and right now you say it's approximately 20% developed. If you open it up now, or when it's 25% or whatever, you've got only 25% of the households that would actually be starting to use, if they used it all, Satinwood Drive, as opposed to if you wait till it's 75% complete, then the minute you open that street, you have 75% or 75 or 80 or 90 households that the day it opens can start using Satinwood Drive, as opposed to a very gradual increase of traffic on Satinwood Drive as they build up from 20% to 75 or 80%. That's just another way to look at that, as a gradual as opposed to a much more immediate impact.
That's very good, Ms. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Lamb.
That's why you do a great job on the Planning Commission. You think of things we don't think of.
Mr. Lamb?
Yes, Mr. Young.
Could we, first of all, I withdraw my motion if I can, because there's no second.
I never recognized it.
That's good. That's what my wife says. But can you look at this in less than a month, Mr. Adelot?
I'll be ready at the next meeting. I'll be ready at the next meeting in 2 weeks.
Okay, I think we're ready for a motion.
Well, let me ask a question.
I thought we were ready. Excuse me.
Can we, and I don't know if this would help the developer, the only question here is Satinwood Drive, but there's more to this application than Satinwood Drive in reference to the means and how he's going to develop it, versus phase 3 or 1. I'm sure I'm saying it wrong. But can we, if it would behoove the developer, could we approve it with a deferment on the extension of Satinwood Drive and allow the developer to continue on?
Well,
in that fashion.
The proposal is opening that next phase, which would include that street. So
Yeah.
I think a 2-week deferral would be in order so they can look at the whole plan.
Okay.
Ken, I'd had that same thought to what Joseph was saying, is the interplay of what opening that or not opening it has to do with the rest of what they're wanting to do with it at this time. But I think we look at it in a couple of weeks and see if there's a different percentage, something that would work out for both of them. We're looking at those other pieces of it, Joseph, that you
We'll be prepared.
mentioned.
We'll be prepared in 2 weeks, and we'll have Mr. We'll be conferring with the developers and Mr. Taylor.
I would also encourage the neighbors to have some more input into the situation also, because the neighbors in Prim Springs, we've heard from them tonight, but that dialogue needs to be continuous.
Yeah, you've got at least the homeowners association president here tonight. If you would get with her and include her in those discussions so that we know, and the others here too if they wish, but at least you've got that one particular contact to have.
I think we're ready for a motion.
I think we are too.
You wouldn't let me make one last time.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion to defer this to the next meeting, planning session.
Motion is made and seconded. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. I want to apologize again to the residents of Prim Springs and to Mr. McGowan for making you wait till the wee hours. It's way past Mr. Young and my bedtime, too, so I'm sorry you had to wait to the very last public hearing for this. But I would ask you to probably talk to Mr. Adelot in the next few days, if you would, and let's try to get something worked out in the next couple of weeks, okay? Thank you very much.
Ms. Lasley, if you'll come up and give Ms. Jaco some contact information, I'll be in touch with you.
Yes, in just 1 second. Mr. Adelot, that concludes our public hearing portion of our agendas tonight. We'll move on to staff reports and other business. You dare not have any.
Oh, I have none.
Okay. In that case, stand adjourned.
He dare not.